Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another day of BlinkyMTG streaming. How's it going? How's everyone doing? Has anything happened the last couple of days? I guess for anything? Probably nothing much. I haven't streamed in a while. I was busy going to a tournament in another country, and I'll be going through what happened in that tournament today. So, first thing I wanted to start with was, where have I been? I went to Barcelona, as it's pronounced, I guess. Yeah, Barcelona, Spain. Played in a Mythic championship, a modern one, in fact. Here's my calendar. Basically, on the 18th of July, I flew to Barcelona, Spain, via Montreal. Why does it say YVR? Montreal's YUL. Anyway, flew to Barcelona, Spain, landed at noon on Friday, completely zonked out of my brain because I didn't really sleep much on the flight. I watched some pretty bad movies. Arrived on Friday the 19th in Barcelona, and then, wait for it. And then I checked into this lovely Airbnb, which I later described as both a dungeon and a cell. Let's see if I can get this on screen. Yeah, this little Airbnb, what you can see here is the entire... I was in a private room inside of an Airbnb. I had a bed, a window, which was mostly just garbage trucks outside, and a tiny little desk, and a tiny little fan attached to the desk, and a little heater that I obviously never used. So I... because I was going to Spain so early, I did this to myself. I could have stayed in a nicer place, but because I was going to Spain so early, and I was going to be spending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 nights in some accommodation. I wanted to save as much money as I could, so I got an Airbnb for $44 a night Canadian. It was a single private room that was relatively close to the convention center. So I only have myself to blame on that one. During the flight, this happens all the time. You know, you're breathing all sorts of recircled air of 200 people for 8 hours. I caught a bit of a cold. And unfortunately came down pretty hard with that cold over the next couple of days. On, I think, the 20th, maybe the 21st, Matthew Stein, one of my teammates, arrived, and we went and actually toured around Barcelona a little bit. If I pull up my Twitter again. I saw some of the Gaudi architecture that was across the city of Spain. He made some cool apartment buildings like this one. He built some stuff at a fancy public park like that. This is also part of that public park. He obviously made the Sagrada de Familia, the big crazy Gothic cathedral that looks all kind of wonky that he also made. So Matthew and I went around, I guess on the 21st there, toured things around. And then on the 22nd or so, the Monday, I decided, well, I was still really jet lagged. I was still waking up at like 3 in the morning. I was still waking up at like 3 in the morning and being crazy jet lagged. So, and I was feeling really sick. And so rather than like do much of anything, I decided to try to like sleep off both the jet lag and my cold. So I mostly just like laid in bed, tried not to sweat to death, and watched, I finally started watching Stranger Things. I've never watched it before. So I actually made it through 2 seasons of Stranger Things in that day. Mostly just trying to recuperate and sleep and so on. Didn't really make a lot of progress. Actually, another thing I did on the Saturday, I skipped over, was I played in a Mox Preliminary, or not a Mox Preliminary, but a Modern Challenge with Eldrazi the deck that I actually brought to the Mythic Championship. I guess we can go ahead and look at that now. So the Mythic Championship was Modern constructed. I had been using Mana Traders to practice all kinds of different Modern decks, and in the weekend previous, I played in a Mox Preliminary with Hardened Scales. I tried Blue-White Control. I tried Is It Phoenix. I tried Dredge, Classic Dredge, not Hogak Dredge. I tried all kinds of stuff. And one thing that led me to try this deck, this Eldrazi Tron deck, was this article series. Well, basically this article written by Toby Henke. Toby Henke is an author for ChannelFireball.com. And Channel Fireball is the exclusive provider or event coordinator of Magic Fests or Grand Prix now. And possibly as a result, Toby Henke gets a lot of access to decklist information from those events, and then uses that information to write somewhat informative articles about the metagame, particularly in Modern. He was writing a lot about Is It Phoenix, back when that was sort of the new hotness, and also KCI, Cart Clan Ironworks, when that deck was like on the verge of being banned. And so he wrote this article about all the happenings at Magic Fest Dallas, which happened to be a large tournament in Modern before the banning of Bridge from Below. And the information that I gleaned from this was partly what the metagame looked like. It wasn't terribly useful because this was pre-Bridge from Below ban, but more importantly, in here he wrote about the win rates of all the decks, both their win rates against the field entirely, which included Bridgevine decks, and their win rate against non-Bridgevine decks. And what stood out to me was, and actually I rejiggered his numbers in a simpler format just so you could see it better, is apparently Colorless Eldrazi had the highest win percentage against the non-Bridgevine decks at 60.3% over the course of the entire GP Dallas, over 272 matches. And even against, if I go back to even against, when Hogak matches were included, it only went down to 59%. So it was still pretty good against even Hogak decks. So that every time I get that kind of information, I get pretty interested, and so I decided to maybe give Colorless Eldrazi a whirl. So I played that on, let's go back to my calendar. So I played that on Saturday in the Modern Challenge. And I did okay, actually, in the Modern Challenge. Oh boy. Let's see if I can find it. It would have been this one. I ended up... Oh, there's Vero, actually. I ended up in 12th place? No, 16th place? 20th place? There I am, 20th place. So I actually had a win in for top 8 in the final round, and I lost to possibly... Oh, I think to Hogak. Yeah. I lost to Hogak in my win in, and which was somewhat frustrating. But I did pretty... Hey, Judge Greg, how's it going? But I did pretty well in that challenge, and I was sort of like getting further and further solidified on this being the deck I wanted to play. What difference did I have this deck? I had my main deck Warping Whale at this point. Did I have... You know what? I think... Oh yeah, I had Oblivion Stone in. That was the last card that I cut. I think this Oblivion Stone became something else. Couldn't tell you what that something else was at this exact moment. But yeah, I was one card off of the deck I submitted in my Mythic Championship. Let's see, Varo is actually the guy... Varo made top 8 of this tournament. He lost in the corners, and that's actually the guy that I lost my semifinals to. That's hilarious. Wonder if he played... Yeah, he just played... looks like just about the same deck. So, a couple of us giving away free information on Magic Online leading up to the tournament. Another crucial thing that happened was in this same event, this Modern Challenge, Canister, aka Piotr Glogoski, went 12-0 with Hogak. He didn't drop a single match and won the entire tournament, which I think led a lot of people to play Hogak, a lot more than I was expecting. Anyway, if we go back to the... I guess another thing I'll mention, going back to the calendar... Oh, it's here. Was on this weekend, the 13th, was a Mox Preliminary, which I also played in. I played... Or, sorry, it's here on the 14th. It was a Mox Preliminary. I also played that. I didn't play Eldrazi in that. I played Hardened Scales because I was like, oh, maybe Hardened Scales is good, because I had been playing Eldrazi and I lost a Hardened Scales player, and I was like, wow, maybe Karn the Great Creator isn't all that in a bag of chips. But then I played Hardened Scales and got absolutely battered in that Mox Preliminary, mostly because, well, I don't think I did too bad for myself in terms of like play mistakes and stuff, but it was just I played against a lot of blue-white control, which was a terrible matchup. But after during that Mox Preliminary, I stuck it out and watched. I wanted to figure out what everyone's deck was in that Mox Preliminary. A lot of times, the decks that published on Magic Gathering Online aren't the entire picture, and I was really interested in both what everyone's playing and secondarily how the win percentage was in all those decks. So what I did, and what you can do if you're really keen on Magic Gathering Online, is if you play in a large premier event, like, say, is there one that's coming up? Apparently there's no upcoming tournaments, but if you play in a large premier event, you can actually watch replays of other people's matches at the conclusion of the event. And because of that, you can actually find out what decks other people were on, even if they didn't get like top 32 and their deck list isn't actually published. And because you can do that, you can actually then figure out what decks beat what other decks, and figure out the win percentage of all these different decks, and also the metagame percentage of all the decks, which again is sort of hidden from view if you don't have access to all the deck lists. So I did that for this Mox preliminary and saw that, holy smokes, there was 12% of the field was Jund, and although it only won about 50% of its matches, next most popular deck, this again is the Mox preliminary that was 2 weekends before the Pro Tour. This is the weekend before the Pro Tour. This is the Pro Tour weekend, and this is 2 weekends before the Pro Tour. I saw that Is It Phoenix was the next highest percentage of the field. It again had like a pretty bad win percentage, 47%. That got brutalized. Hogak, post Bridgefine ban, or Bridge from the Below ban, was 7% of the field. It did also pretty good, 60%. But this Eldrazi Tron deck, again, had a 60% win percentage. So in combination of this Mox preliminary and GP Dallas, it both of the times winning 6% of its matches and being the highest win percentage deck, I decided, you know what? I think I'm on this Eldrazi Tron list. So I started just jamming leagues with it nonstop. I actually did quite well in leagues. I think I went like, I don't know, 16-3 or something like that in leagues, and I was sort of set. It was just, from that point, it's just a matter of finalizing the final numbers. So that's kind of what I did in the days leading up to the tournament. More the Canadians showed up. We did some testing in person, played some Eldrazi Tron in person. The first time actually playing with Karn the Great Creator in person, and made the mistake in playtesting of like shuffling the cards that I got from my sideboard with Karn back in my library and having to like remember to take them out again, and that'll come up later. But did a lot of testing. There were some people that were playing the Hogak deck, and I played like not enough matches against that, honestly. And there was other people that were on like Scape Shift and stuff like that, played against a little bit of them. But we didn't honestly have too much time to do that because other folks, it was just me on Friday. Matthew Stein arrived on Saturday. We hung out on Sunday. I tried to like sleep off my cold on Monday. Tuesday, more people were there. We did some in-person testing. Wednesday, we did some in-person testing. And then we had to submit our deck lists at midnight. So I was locked on e-tron at that point. And then Thursday, we went to the event site and played a bunch of drafts. I had bought a booster box of Modern Horizons. Here she is. I bought a booster box of Modern Horizons with a whole bunch of trade credit, or store credit, and some cash at my local game store for $300 Canadian. And I was like, I'm going to be the guy that came prepared with all the boosters. I'm going to bring this to Spain, and everyone will love me so much because we'll be able to draft nonstop. And then we got to the event site on Thursday, and it turns out everyone in the Pro Tour or Mythic Championship got 9 boosters of Modern Horizons, which is enough for everyone to draft 3 times, which at the end of the day is all we really had time for. So I never had to open my Modern Horizons box. I was no longer the hero of the day, and I ended up bringing this sealed box of Modern Horizons all the way to Barcelona and then bringing it all the way back. So it's the most well-traveled box of boosters I've ever heard of. But anyway, we played some 3 practice drafts on Thursday, in addition to the 2 that we did on Wednesday. I'd already played something like 45-ish drafts on Magic Online leading up to the event. That's what I had done all the time leading up to July 8th, which is when the ban and restricted announcement for Modern was announced, and that's when we found out that Bridge from Below was banned, and that's when I thought, oh, this Hogak deck is gone. We can start exploring the format post-Hogak. Little did I know at the time. But anyway, played some more drafts. Locked in my deck list. This is the final deck list that I went with. I think in that Modern Challenge... Let's see if I've got that here still. Yeah, in the Modern Challenge, I think I was playing... I was playing Ugin the Ineffable. I decided... What I did was I made a list of like the top 10 decks in the format. Something equivalent to this in terms of the metagame. And I decided which would I rather have in terms of my like 6 mana slot. because you can only really have room for like 2 to 3 of these sorts of cards, Endbringer or Ugin. And let me turn my preview. That is up. Yeah, Endbringer or Ugin the Ineffable. And so I went through the list, and there's 10 to the 10 decks, and I went like, okay, blue-white control, I'd rather have Ugin because it can't get past the exiled. Jund, I'd rather have Ugin because it doesn't get Liliana'd. Hogak, I'd rather have Endbringer because it could stop. Unlike it could stop like a Hogak with the colorless tap or target creature count attack or block, etc., etc. I went through the list, and I ended up at a dead even heat. I had 5 decks I'd rather have Ugin against, 5 decks I'd rather have Endbringer against, and then my tiebreaker for myself was, well, Endbringer you can cast off Eldrazi Temple, so you could theoretically cast Endbringer as early as turn 3. Ugin you can't cast off Eldrazi Temple. The only way you can cast it that quickly is off the Tron lands, and it's nice to be able to have like spells you can cast even if you don't assemble full Tron. Tron being Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Tower, Urza's Mine, and the thing that's written on my shirt actually. Although it's I mirror my camera so that I can point at things. Not that I do that very much, but yeah, Tron. So that was the deck I locked in on a Wednesday. The sideboard, I went with the 4 Leyline of the Voids because I was giving full respect to Hogak. I cut the traditional sort of Karn Wishboard things of Trinisphere and Crucible Worlds. Crucible Worlds I cut because I had it in my deck during all the playtesting on Magic Online, and I realized like Crucible Worlds is basically a blank. If you've already got Karn out, then Crucible is basically not helping you really because you've already gotten 4 mana. You don't really need a whole lot more than resolving a Karn a lot of the time. And against the decks where you need to like start going off and like ghost coding them nonstop, Karning for a liquid metal coating, where'd it go? Liquid metal coating, or if you're that far ahead, Mycosynth Lattice is just as good. So I cut the Crucible Worlds. The same thing, I do like Trinisphere. Trinisphere is a powerful card, but I thought with the main deck Chalices, I didn't also need Trinisphere to beat the like Phoenix decks and things like that. So I decided to cut the Trinisphere to make room for 2 things that wouldn't normally be in the deck, is Mystic Forge and Wormcoil Engine, because I was still sort of locked in the idea that Jund was going to be one of the most popular, if not the most popular deck in the format, and I also thought the Eldrazi Tron Mirror was likely something I'd have to face quite a bit. And so for those 2 reasons, I decided to rock out the Mystic Forge and the Wormcoil Engine. Yeah, that was sort of how I landed on this deck. A combination of third-party data from a Magic Fest, third-party data from a Mox Preliminary, myself playing with the deck and liking it a fair amount, and doing some theory crafting on like how it's positioned in the meta. Also, the Mythic Championship had another weird facet to it, unlike any other kind of Magic tournament, particularly those on Magic Online and in paper, is that we knew going into it that the deck list would be open. At the start of every Modern round, you and your opponent exchange you get handed, the Wizards of the Coast prints out a deck list for you that you have to hold on to for the next 2 days, because at the start of every constructed round, you have to give your deck list to your opponent. It has the entire contents of your main deck along with numbers, and then it has the cards in your sideboard, but not how many numbers are on them. But it's pretty easy against a Karn Wishboard style of deck to basically figure out every card in the sideboard, because if we look at it, I've got 4 Leyline of the Voids and then 11 one-ofs. And so they would see 12 cards listed there and probably rightfully assume that, oh, he's probably got 4 Leyline of the Voids and then these 11 one-ofs. So, but because of the open deck lists, that allowed me to know that, to make my mulligan decisions a lot easier, know that, oh, Chalice of the Void is insane, I should try and mulligan a hand to get Chalice of the Void. Or know what? No, you're up against a different Tron matchup. It's very important you get your Tron lands going. Or you're up against Jund. Just keep a hand with a lot of mana and whatever cards so that you don't get Thoughtseize to death. That sort of stuff. So I really liked open deck list, particularly because of the Chalice of the Void in this deck, and also the fact that this deck mulligans a fair amount to begin with, and it's nice to know what you need to mulligan for sometimes. So that was another facet. Also, the bad matchups for Eldrazi Tron are actual Tron. That was basically the worst matchup, and as it turns out, probably Hardened Scales. And I thought both those decks would be pretty low percentages. Regular Greentron, it was a fair amount of the field in this Mox prelim that I was basing a lot of my information off of. It was about 4%, but like 4% out of, you know, that's pretty small size. And then there was maybe one guy, it was probably just Varro, playing Hardened Scales. Let's see if I can see it. There's regular affinity. Oh, there was 5 people playing Hardened Scales, and they went sub 50%. So I was like, those are my bad matchups. Greentron, Hardened Scales, we're laughing. So that's kind of how I settled on Greentron. Let's look at my calendar again. We're almost to the day of the tournament. There we go. So, yeah, here we are. Basically locked in on Wednesday, drafted all day Thursday, tried to fall asleep at a reasonable time, and then Friday the Mythic Championship started. All through this time, I kept waking up at like 3 to 5 a.m. and then like trying to sleep again, but also not sleep in too late. I think on Saturday, when I was maybe supposed to meet Matthew, I woke up at like 5 or 3 or 4 or 5. Tried to sleep for a while, didn't really succeed. Like finally did fall asleep at like 9 a.m. and then I woke up again at like 2 in the afternoon, and like Matthew was supposed to arrive at like noon, and he wanted to like go gung-ho right as soon as he landed. I was like really panicking. I was like, oh no, I slept in. But because of that experience on the Saturday, for the rest of the time, I was like, whenever I woke up at 5, I was like, okay, there's no point in even trying to sleep again. Otherwise, my alarms might not go off. I might just sleep through the entire start of the Mythic Championship. So, not to build up a layer of excuses here, but yeah, I wasn't getting a lot of sleep over the course of this week. But the Mythic Championship started on Friday, and how exciting it was! So there's 470 players, and now I'm going to go through sort of round by round how my tournament went. So the first round, let's see, I emailed the pod to myself, I think. Guess I didn't successfully do that. So at the start of the tournament, everyone gets split into draft pods. Basically, there's 470 of us, and we had to be divided into all these 8-person draft pods. And the draft pods, we'd be booster drafting, 8 of us sitting around in a circle or on a table, and then creating a 40-card booster draft deck out of that, and then playing only other people within that draft pod. Different from how drafting works on both Magic Arena and Magic the Gathering Online, where you draft with 8 people, sometimes 7 other bots and yourself, or sometimes Magic Online with other players, and then you play against just anybody who has a similar record. Different in the Mythic Championship and on day 2s of Magic Fests, and how things always used to be done. I don't have it. I took a picture of my draft pod, but I tried to send it to myself just to read it off, basically. So, my first draft pod. Hey, El Puto Modelatron. Thank you so much. So my first pod at the Mythic Championship was, here were the 8 players. A guy named Jacob Nagro, myself, Alex Olson, Tetsuhiro Takahashi. Let's see if we can look them up. Tetsuro Takahashi. Oh my, there's many Takahashis. Tetsuhiro. Okay, so Tetsuhiro Takahashi. He sort of, it was his first Mythic Championship, I think. Yeah. And then Vedanto Wijay, his name I'd heard of, a old school pro. Mattia Oneto, who I at the time didn't really know who that was, but I think they, someone told, I thought they did quite well at a tournament leading up to this event, but it doesn't seem like that. They're just a fine player, however. Then John Rolfe, who's an MPL member, and then Tobias Roos, which was one of my testing team colleagues from Vancouver, actually. So my first draft deck, I threw that up into Magic Online here. So the draft was Modern Horizons draft, and I followed this sort of strategy laid out by people like Ben Stark and Mike Sigrist and others, and of basically always trying to stay open. Basically trying to force a deck is a high variability move that can sometimes give you a very good deck if it turns out that you forced it and it was open in your seat, or you can end in utter disaster when it turns out you're getting cut off that deck and the deck is not open in your seat. Say the people passing to you are also drafting those colors or that deck, and so I always try to follow a strategy of staying open. There are decks in Magic Modern Horizons and in any draft format that are better than other deck. There's colors that are better than other colors, but draft is self-correcting. If everyone doesn't want to draft white, say, which was consensus worst color in Modern Horizons, but if you're the only white drafter at a table, you'll still end up with a very strong deck that will defeat other people. So I ended up with this deck. So it started off with a pack one, pick one, where I had a choice of Hogak, the infamous card of the tournament for Modern Horizons, versus not a whole lot else. And I decided to go with Hogak. Hogak, obviously difficult to cast. You need to be able to fill up your graveyard and have multiple creatures in play to convoke it out. But it's both a green and a black card. You could play it in a green, any kind of green deck, any kind of black deck, or even better, a green and black deck. But that means that there's only like, of the 10 color pairs, there's only like 2 or 3 that you wouldn't be able to play your Hogak in. So I thought it was a strong card that did require a bit of a deck building cost because you have to find a way to like fill your graveyard with stuff. But you could still put it in a green or black deck, so I went with Hogak, pack one, pick one. And as it turned out, the green was relatively open. I ended up getting 3 Winding Way, which were particularly synergistic with Hogak and are also synergistic with some of the green archetype things, particularly green-red or green-black. And then as it turned out, I saw I got past like a 6th pick Tectonic Reformation, which is like a so-so rare, but pretty strong in the like red-green lands deck. So I took that sort of over nothing, really. And then I got a late Scale Guardian in pack 1, and I decided, well, okay, the red-green sort of lands and graveyard deck was open. I already have, I think by that point I already had some multiple Winding Ways, and Winding Way leads well with that deck and Hogak, so I decided to sort of like move into it after it was pretty clearly open. I ended up with a Forgotten Cave and a Tranquil Thicket, and then to put lands in my graveyard, in addition to Alpine Guide, if it dies, can put a land in your graveyard. Winding Way, naming creatures, can put lands in your graveyard. Tectonic Reformation can put lands in your graveyard. Lavadar can put lands in your graveyard. Excavating Aneroid can put lands in your graveyard. And Tuco Husk or Cultivator, can put lands into your graveyard. And I thought, well, okay, that's pretty darn good. And the payoffs for having lands in my graveyard were casting cheap Scale Guardians. 4 for Flying Haste, cost 1 colorless less for each land card in your graveyard, so I got 2 of those. Also, Igneous Elemental, if you have a land card in your graveyard, it's only 4 mana instead of 6. And the Threshold from Excavating Aneroid wants me to have cards in my graveyard, not necessarily lands in my graveyard, and also Marasa Behemoth becomes a 9 or an 8/8 trample if you have land card in your graveyard. So I had enablers, I had payoffs, I had a little bit of acceleration, I had ways to sort of draw cards with Winding Way, or cycling my lands, or cycling them even harder with Tectonic Reformation. The one thing I think this deck was lacking a fair amount was removal. I had 1 Lava Dart and 2 Magmatic Sinkholes and a Igneous Elemental as my only way to actually interact with a creature. I had a sideboard Tornado that I brought in a couple times, but it was a little light on removal and a little slow out of the gates because a lot of time on turn 2 I'd be casting like a Winding Way, and I didn't have particularly good 3-drop slot. My entire 3-drop was basically an Alpine Guide, cycling Croson Tusker, or oftentimes paying the Echo from Orcish Hellraiser and playing another 2-drop, which is why I was really happy to have a lot of 2s. So, decent-ish deck. Not as much removal as I would like, but overall pretty synergistic and has a decent amount of power level, particularly if I'm not run over myself. Some of the cards, the one card that was hard to cut was the Squirrel Nest. A lot of times Squirrel Nest pretty strong card, but I didn't have any sort of like combos really with Squirrel Nest. I didn't have Scale Up. I didn't have Rhyme Tender to make it go off, and I figured I was already kind of good on the ground with between Trumpeting Herd, just like cheap 2-drop creatures pretty early on, and then like Marasa Behemoth, that losing to other even more ground creatures doesn't seem how I was going to lose. I figured if anything, I was probably going to lose by like wasting my time making squirrels when my opponent is ninjaing the heck out of me or flying over. So I left Squirrel Nest on the sideboard. And the only other thing is I sort of took a Force of Vigor somewhat late, just as a potential sideboard card. So, pretty decent draft deck overall. I would rate it at like a 6 out of 10 kind of thing. Pretty synergistic. I think it was the right deck to draft in my seat. Oh, one thing I was really worrisome in this draft, this is the first draft of the Mythic Championship on day one, was a whole lot of uncommon and rare blue-red slivers were opened. Like, a lot of them. I was really worried that there was going to be some insano sliver deck at the table if someone identified that red and white were open in their seat and also got shipped all those slivers. Luckily for me, and I guess everyone else at the draft pod, no one really went for the sliver deck. So all those slivers kind of went to waste. Sadly, I think a lot of like the 1/1 red haste, 1/1 or white red, 1/1 rare sliver where all slivers you control get become flyers that have haste. That one was open, like all sorts of crazy slivers, but wasn't really punished. So now let's go to the sort of recap of the tournament. So the first three rounds were draft. My first match of the tournament, I lost very easily to Tetsuro Takahashi. He basically overloaded. He made a lot of random creatures. He was sort of a green-white deck, made a whole bunch of random creatures, had his own squirrel nest, had some just random dorks. Sure, my creatures individually were larger than his, but then he overloaded a scale up and swung and killed me in game 1. In game 2, similar sort of thing happened, except I got my Marasa Behemoth out, but then he Winter's Rested it. After seeing both Winter's Rest and Squirrel Nest in game 1, I actually sideboarded in Force of Vigor, and when my opponent Winter's Rested Hogak and had a answered. Did I have Hogak? Yeah, I think I had Hogak, not Marasa Behemoth. But he Winter's Rested Hogak and had an Answered Prayers in his deck. And out in play, I got to Force of Vigor, both the removal spell on my giant creature and the Answered Prayers, and I was like, oh, here we go, 2 for 1. Stabilized the board, but then he just untapped and overloaded Scale Up again and killed me. Scale Up being like a sort of overrun style effect, where all your little creatures suddenly become 6/4s, and you can pay 6 total mana to do that. So, got ranched by Tetsuro in round 1. Round 2, so I said this to John when I got paired to him. I was like, well, John Rolfe, MPL player, clearly a good player. As you can see here, his like ELO rating is 1967, very high, which means he's won a lot in the past. And I was familiar with that. I was familiar with him by name. So as soon as I got paired against him, I was like pretty disappointed because I was like, here we go again. As you can guess, when my Mythic Championship record leading up to Mythic Championship in Barcelona was 10-20. I had previously done very poorly, particularly in the draft portion of Mythic Championship / Pro Tours, and I was worried that we were going down that road yet again. When I lost round 1, I got paired against John Rolfe in round 2. But lucky for me, John Rolfe, while a very strong Magic player and a very active Standard and I guess modern Magic player, he clearly does not play a lot of draft, and particularly not a lot of Modern Horizons draft. I don't know, I'd have to ask him, I never did, but I don't think he prepared enough or very much at all perhaps in the Modern Horizons limited format, and his deck was not very strong. He was reading a lot of cards, and in fact missed a situation where I had used the Lava Dart earlier in a game, and it was still in my graveyard, and this card is flashback by sacrificing Mount. Actually, John Rolfe missed a situation where he put himself dead on board to my Lava Dart and graveyard. So I won game 1 against his sort of white-black pseudo-changeling deck with a whole lot of... let's see if I can think of the name of the card. Feaster of Fools. Yeah, he... both games, I think, John Rolfe played 2 Feaster of Fools, just off of like a whole lot of little white creatures and then a big Feaster of Fools, and that sort of being the capstone thing. But in order to cast a Feaster of Fools, you have to like tap a lot of your other creatures and like sacrifice some of them. So just with a bunch of like little 3-power creatures, I was able to kill him in one game. And then another game, I think I just went off.
You will watch me.
And had another sort of quick start. Maybe I had a giant Marasa Behemoth or something, but basically just killed him pretty quickly with just aggressive stuff. Thank you so much for the follow. Caustic Games. So, beat John Rolfe 2-0. We had a fun little interaction afterward where he and I both went through the board state in game 1, where he sort of left himself dead to Lava Dart, and we sort of walked through what his options were and if there's any way for him to survive that turn. It was kind of fun to do that. I recreated the board state for us, and we sort of walked through it. And basically what we found, because I had the ability to dash out an additional treetop ambushers, there's no way for him to survive. But it was fun all the same. So that was... how did this end up on this side? That was round 2 of the draft. Beating Jean Rolf 2-0. So I was okay. Now I'm feeling a little bit better. Like, I just beat an MPL player. I'm not going to 0-3 this draft. And I kind of crushed him 2-0. I was like, maybe this will go okay. Next round I get paired against Tobias Roos. So I'd played on Thursday. I played 2 or 3 practice drafts against Tobias Roos, and I had exactly this situation occur where I had a deck filled with Orcish Hellraisers, 2 mana 3/2s, and Tobias had a deck filled with 2 mana 0/4s and Iceberg Cankrix. He did that to me on Thursday and beat me very easily. And then here I am again facing him, and I have Hellraisers, and it turns out he had Cankrixes. Tobias had a bit of a 4-color snow deck. And it was quite a bit of a grind against him. In game 1, he killed me with the Rot Widow pack. So like things were going okay, and then he just sort of ground me out by activating Rot Widow pack multiple times and dealing like 3 to me, then 4 to me, then like 5 to me. So he killed me pretty fast with that. He was doing a little bit of Cankrix stuff, but then became evident that I had Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, so I think he shaved one of his and I cared about putting lands in my graveyard, so he actually shaved one of his Cankrixes so as to not to enable my own deck for myself, and I was able to put the pressure on him. And he actually stumbled a bit, I think, in game 2 and didn't do a whole lot, and I just basically killed him with probably a Marassa Behemoth and some Hellraisers. Game 3 was... Oh, another thing that happened in game 1 was Tobias played Sling Gang Lieutenant. So between Sling Gang Lieutenant and... Hey, DC Sports 8, how's it going? Thank you so much. Yeah, Sling Gang Lieutenant and in combination with the Rot Widow pack, like, did me in game 1. So after game 1, I decided I better bring in my own Squirrel Nest, and I brought in my own Goblin War Party to sort of also have like a wide board to sort of like counter his goblins with my goblins and counter his squirrels with my squirrels. And what I also did was I brought in one Geomancer's Gambit because I had it sleeved up. What I should have actually done was bring in both Geomancer's Gambits, because what you can do with Geomancer's Gambit is normally in a deck like this is you would... The point of it is to destroy one of your own lands, put a land into your graveyard to enable Igneous Elemental coming down on turn 4, or turn Marassa Behemoth into a 8/8, or make Orscale Guardian come out a little bit quicker. And you can sometimes fix your mana, maybe you need an additional red source, and you draw a card. So it's like, it's a weird divination where you destroy your own lands with it. That's what it's normally used for. But when your opponent has a Squirrel Nest enchanting one of their lands, you could target their Squirrel Nest land with the Geomancer's Gambit, destroying their land, drawing a card for yourself. And yes, they do get to replace that land, but at least you've got rid of the Squirrel Nest. So I brought in one Geomancer's Gambit to try and beat Tobias's Squirrel Nest thing, but should have brought in the second one. And as it turns out, after I took the stung of defeat of getting scaled up in both games 1 and 2 in round 1, I also realized that Tobias also had a scale up. So between all his goblins and stuff, I really wanted to be prepared to beat a wide board. What ended up happening in game 3 is we both ended up with Squirrel Nests, each just making squirrels against each other, sort of grinding it out. He chipped away at my life total, but I was sort of, and I think I was stalled on land for a little bit, sort of developing things. At one point, I was at 12 life, and Tobias went for what would have been, a lethal overloaded scale up with 5 attackers. Let me get my card preview window. With 5 attackers, but I had Lava Dart in my hand, so I was able to, in response to the overloaded scale up, I was able to kill a squirrel, flashback, kill a squirrel, and then make a squirrel and just chump block his like 6/4s. And then from there, I think I drew a bunch of cards. I untapped Winding Wade, hit like 3 creatures, including Orscale Guardian. Got to cast an Orscale Guardian for 3 mana instead of 7 because I had so many lands in my graveyard, and I was able to take it down from there. So managed to defeat a scale up with this sort of Lava Dart off the top. or in my hand, and take it down. So that was the conclusion of the draft. Was feeling pretty nice. 2-1ing the Mythic Championship draft. My best record ever in a Mythic Championship draft. Like I said, in the past, it's not gone so well for me in the draft portion. And the absolute reason for that is I just didn't draft enough back in the past. The Magic Arena coming along allowed me to draft like a lot. Obviously, you can't draft Modern Horizons in Magic Arena, but it's sort of like reinforced. I knew the fundamentals of draft. I've always been an avid listener of limited resources, but it's just a matter of getting repetitions with draft, identifying the archetypes, identifying the power level of the various cards. Like, it really helps to play a lot, especially when it comes to draft. And so this time, like I said, I drafted 50 times coming into the Mythic Championship, and I was actually a bit more prepared, and I knew, I had drafted various archetypes, basically all the archetypes in the format multiple times, and I was able to take down Tobias and John Rolfe and go 2-1 in the draft. So now we're on to the modern round. So each day there's 3 rounds of draft and then 5 rounds of constructed, in this case modern constructed. So my first round was against Shota Yasuoka. Yeah, I got up to my Twitch power, absolutely. And what I've got here is everyone in the tournament's deck list. Let's see if I can pull that up. Shota, yes, so that'll be the last page, I guess. So Shota was on Is It Phoenix? Pretty standard deck, the kind of deck that I had actually played myself quite a bit leading up to Magic Fest Calgary. I played Is It Phoenix. I played a standard Is It Phoenix deck to qualify for the Mythic Championship of Barcelona, so pretty familiar with this style of deck. And when I saw that I was paired against Shota, because I recognized him when he sat down, I was a little bit terrified. A, because Shota is an amazing player. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, and he's one of my Magic pro heroes. I love watching Shota play. I love seeing the decks that he brings, because a lot of time he's quite the innovator when it comes to decks at the Mythic Championship and other tournaments. But this was an instance where Shota apparently wasn't able to break it, because he showed up with a fairly stock Phoenix list here. There's nothing terribly crazy about this list. Yeah, in fact, some of the stuff like, I don't know, Young Pyromancer is a little old school. And actually this deck list here only has the sort of one-of style for the sideboard. So we don't know the actual numbers here unless I went and looked it up. But at the start of the round, this is basically the deck list I saw when we exchanged our deck lists. So the Aria Flame, pretty standard. So knowing that Shota was on Is It Phoenix, I tried desperately to try and find a Chalice of the Void in the first game. Let's go to Modern. Let's go to my deck. Chalice of the Void, incredibly powerful against Is It Phoenix, because they have a whole lot of 1-mana cards in their deck. And if you can Chalice the Void on 1, you could basically turn off... Let me cough. You can counter, a good chunk of the cards in the deck. Let's see how many cards you can counter. So Serum Visions is 4, 6, 10, 12, 16, 19, 21, 24, 25... 25 plus basically Finale of Promise, 26, 27. Like 27 of the something like, I guess he's got 42. Yeah, 27 of the 42 cards that are in their entire library are 1-mana spells. So if you can Chalice the Void on 1, you can really do a number of these Phoenix decks. So I tried to mulligan for Chalice in game 1. Didn't really succeed. Ended up keeping a medium hand that didn't really do a lot. I think I had to Dismember as a way to kill a Thought-Knot Seer, but Shota just got 2 Phoenixes out, and he just killed me. Post board, I boarded in my Leyline of the Voids as well as my Grafdigger's Cage. I think I kept a game 2 hand where I had a Dismember and a Cage, and then some like Eldrazi, and I chaliced on 1, and Shota didn't find an answer to it before I killed him with a Thought-Knot Seer. And game 3, I think largely the same thing occurred. However, I think, let me see, I tweeted about some of this stuff. I think he got a Aria of Flame out. I think I Thought-Knotted him multiple times in game 3, taking a lot of the contents of his hand. He got double Thing in the Ice out and an Aria of Flame, and then had the potential to sort of go off. But my Thought-Knot that had been attacking him the whole time was able to clear through for lethal when I always dusted away 2 Thought-Knots and an Aria of Flame and just attacked for the last 4. So Thought-Knot did the work for me against Shota. So I was really elated to beat Shota. Shota's an incredible opponent. And actually, I have my lifetime against Shota, if we can find it here, maybe. Here he is. Yeah, Pro Tour Magic Origins. Round 1 of Pro Tour Magic Origins back in like 2015, 16. Yeah, here we are. It's 2015. I lost the very first round of the draft to Shota Yasuoka, so I got my revenge. Although I guess I took a game off him there. Yeah, I was able to get my revenge here in the first round of Constructed. So that was exciting. The second round of Modern, I played against Hyuma Nishi, a Japanese player who was on... We can find him again. He was also on Etron. It was actually an Etron mirror. However, he had a different list than mine. Significantly different. And his last name is Nishi, so that'd be this page. Yeah, the key difference between my deck and Nishi's deck is he was playing 4 Simian Spirit Guides. This is a crazy card from Modern that you can exile from your hand to add red mana to your mana pool, and the purpose of this card in this deck is presumably to play Chalice of the Void for 1 on turn 1. So you have tap for a single mana and you Simian Spirit Guide. Boom, you've got a Chalice, like a Chalice that much earlier. Or sometimes maybe getting a Karn out or getting Karn for some sideboard card like a Crucible or a Mycosynth Lattice 1 turn earlier is pretty handy. So that's, I guess, his rationalization for playing Simian Spirit Guide. How does he make room for Simian Spirit Guide? Well, it looks like he cut and all's Dismember, cut and all's Dust. So that's 2. He's actually also playing a Karn Liberated, which is a little bit different. He's also playing a main deck Oblivion Stone. But what else did he have to cut? He's got the 4 Shapers, 4 Smashers, 4 Thought-Knot. He's got the 4 Karn the Great Creators. Look at my own deck list here. Oh, he doesn't have Mind Stones. So I have Mind Stones sort of in 2 of those slots, so I guess that's the difference. So, good news for me against Etron was I did come prepared with Mystic Forge and Wormcoil Engine in my sideboard. But overall, it's a pretty swingy matchup. A lot of it depends on like who gets Tron mana out first and who does stuff first. I actually, later on in the tournament, when I was thinking back at like what did I play against, let's click on this one. At one point, I completely forgot that I ever played against this matchup, and I forgot a lot of the details of it. But what I think happened, well, what I know happened in Game 2, or perhaps Game 3. This is how bad my memory is for this match. Is Hyuma got out a Karn, and let's see what happened. I played like Mattery Shaper. I had Dismember available to me. He played a Thought Knot, took something away. Then he killed my Mattery Shaper. My Mattery Shaper revealed a Blast Zone off the top of my library, which my opponent chuckled at because I think he had 2 Thought Knots in play at that point, and his plan was to play a Karn. And so he's just like, he powered through, he played the Karn, exiled 2 Simian Spirit Guides so that he could Karn minus for Sorceress Spyglass. This card here, 2 mana as it enters the battlefield, look at opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So he played the Sorcerer's Spyglass and named my Blast Zone, so I couldn't put my Blast Zone up to 4 and kill his 2 Thought Knots and his Karn. I think I had Tron mana, so I had a lot of mana available to me, but I had a smaller board. I think I made a very large Walking Ballista and started basically chipping away at his board state and constantly attacking his Karn until it reached a point where... Oh, and also what I did is I played my own Karn. I must have done that. Or at some point, somehow or another, I retrieved a Pithing Needle and was able to play it naming Karn the Great Creators, turning off his Karn and the ability for him to tutor up more stuff, and my Karn was either dead or never had a Karn to begin with. And so I was able to pressure his Karn. Eventually, it reached a point where he played a Blast Zone and tried to use it to blow up my Pithing Needle that was naming his Karn so that he could go on to win the game. But unfortunately, he also had that Sorcerer's Spyglass naming Blast Zone, and it's symmetrical. It affects both players. So I had to call the judge my opponent, and he received a warning for game rule violation. It basically, had I not noticed, I would have essentially gotten cheated. But I did notice, and not that I think it was an honest mistake, and the judge and I both agreed on that, but it would have been a bad way to lose. I think I inevitably won just because my Walking Ballista was gigantic and I was able to continuously add counters to it. Well, not once his Karn died, because I was continually attacking his Karn and putting pressure under him with other permanents and stuff. So that was sort of how I won. The way you win the mirror match with in Eldrazi Tron is like, it sort of matters like 1, who has more mana, and then 2, who has more cards, and 3, like, who has Karn the Great Creator. Because Karn both can stifle the mana and produce more cards for you. If you have a lot of mana, you can deploy your Karn first. You can deploy your Reality Smashers. Reality Smashers is also a big deal because it's bigger than Thought-Knot Seer. It's sort of a mid-range matchup. It's all about grinding out value and also not like getting just demolished by your opponent, just going like Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Tower, and then Karn Liberated on turn 3 or something like that. So I think in both games I had the better mana than my opponent. And both times he had a better start because he has the Simian Spirit Guides, but then both times I had a better late game because I had stuff like Mind Stone, which can cycle to draw a card, and I had stuff like Mystic Forge in my sideboard, although I don't think I deployed Mystic Forge against Nishi. So at the end of the day, I won against him. Does it say whether I won 2-1? Or I won 2-0? Yeah, I honestly do not remember what happened in Game 1, but I do remember some of the details of Game 2. So that was the conclusion of that. Excuse me. The next round was against Julian Steele. That must have been Blue Eye Control, so we can pull up his list. That will be here. Yeah, Julian Steele playing Blue Eye Control. I was pretty pleased to face against this. I've played with and against Blue Eye Control for years, close to a decade. All these cards I know and love, and I've also played a fair number of matches in that Mox Preliminary of Eldrazi Tron against Blue Eye Control, including one match against Gabriel Nassif, although he wasn't playing Blue Eye Control, he was playing like weird mono blue control. But I had a lot of reps of my deck against like a Cryptic Command deck, and I was pretty comfortable in the matchup, and I was really excited to see him playing that. I think what I was able to do against Julian in Game 1 was resolve a Chalice of the Void on X equals 1 early on in the game when he didn't have the ability to counter it, which basically turns off, in this case, a lot of cards for them. Path to Exile and Opt, Surgical Extraction, not so important, but mostly Path to Exile. And if you turn off Path to Exile, that leaves them with only 3 ways, really, to kill, like, Thought-Knot Seer and a Reality Smasher. So once you've Chaliced 1 against Blue Eye Control, your creatures are pretty safe to just attack and crush your opponent, and I think that's basically what happened in Game 1. Game 2, basically a similar thing happened, although I think at one point I made a very risky play of... Did I 2-0 him? I think I did. I think at one point I made the very risky play of not attacking his Narset. He had played a Narset, immediately minused it down to 3, trying to find like an answer to my board of Matter Reshapers and Thought-Knots and Reality Smashers, and I made the like sketchy play of ignoring Narset to attack him directly to put him to like 2 or 3 life, so that a top-decked Walking Ballista would be lethal, and also put myself in a position where if he top-decked a Supreme Verdict or if we go back to his deck list, a Wrath of God or one of his Supreme Verdicts, things could have gone pretty sideways for me. Or I guess Winds of Abandon, but he didn't, and I killed him. So I made a bit of a greedy play against Julian Steele, and he even said it at the time. But got to make him have it, and he, luckily for me, did not. So that was round 6. Round 7, I was playing against David Napolitano. He was on Humans, and spoiler alert, I lose. I think he won the die roll, basically ran me over in Game 1. Game 2, I ran him over by having Tron, and I think I Blast Zoned away all his 1-drops, and I Walking Ballista away all his creatures. Against Humans, the sideboarding is basically you cut all the Chalice of the Voids, because between Aether Vial and Cavernous Souls, Chalice of the Void basically does nothing. And you bring in normally like 2 Spatial Contortions, but I made the executive decision to shave one to add more Karn Wish targets, so you bring in like 1 Spatial Contortion. I brought in my Basilisk Collar. I brought in, I think, the last Walking Ballista and this Wormcoil Engine. And I basically, Game 2, I just killed all his stuff between combination Walking Ballista and Blast Zone, and possibly also an All's Dust. And Game 3, he just had a very quick Mantis Rider and then an additional Mantis Rider, which just killed me. Mantis Rider, very powerful card against... Let's see if we can find the deck list, I guess, that we're talking about. Napolitano, that would be here. Here he is. Yeah, Mantis Rider, just like a 3-mana haste 3/3 that flies over, doesn't get blocked by Matter Reshaper and Thought-Knot Seer, and just keeps attacking you and dealing damage in chunks of 3 or 4 life at a time. It's 4 life if they have exalted triggers from Noble Hierarch. So I lost to humans. Admittedly, not a good matchup, and I knew that sort of going in, so I wasn't too surprised. But you know, I have some of the tools to sort of deal with that. And then if we go back here, the next round I actually got paired against humans again. I was like, uh-oh. But this time, things went a little bit better for me. I think I had a pretty strong draw in game 1. It's hard to remember the exact details of a match in a 16-round tournament, but I think I had a pretty strong draw in game 1. Game 2, he ranched me. And in I think game 1, I eventually like resolved like a 6/6 Walking Ballista and just like shot up his board. And then I did the same thing in game 3, basically. And I had a friend of mine watching our match, and he noticed that Tristan boarded a little strangely. But perhaps it was a sideboard strategy Tristan liked. He like didn't bring in stuff like Gaddock Teague. Oh, I know what particularly what happened in game 3. I kept a hand that was 5 lands, Matter Reshaper, All Is Dust, and in the 5 lands was not Tron. I had two mines, 2 towers, and like I don't know, some random land that was inconsequential. But I mostly kept it because I was on the play, and All Is Dust is such a blowout, and I knew that I had 8 outs. I had between Expedition Map or just drawing the 3rd Tron land that I needed. I had 8 outer to find my other Tron land to get like a quick, a relatively quick All Is Dust. And I think I may have also, yeah, I may have had a Dismember in there too. Maybe it was only 4 lands. But basically I kept the hand on that strength. Ended up ripping the land for the All Is Dust, blowing up his board, which was like 2 Noble Hierarchs and a Thales Lieutenant, and then his plan in hand was to like Phantasmal Image the Thales Lieutenant and then like bounce something and like kill me. But it all worked my way. I did make a mistake in that at one point in game 3 I resolved a Wormcoil Engine, and then I resolved the Wormcoil Engine, passed back to him. He played Militia Bugler. Oh, I have to find a different humans player. I could look at this one. Yeah, he played the card Militia Bugler, got a Reflector Mage from the top of his library, and then I passed back to me, and I didn't attack with Wormcoil Engine. I just missed. Basically, I was like, oh, I should leave back Wormcoil Engine and this Matter Reshaper so that when he plays his Reflector Mage, I'll still have a blocker. But what I should have just done is just leave back Matter Reshaper, attack with Wormcoil Engine, gain 6 life, which is a very important resource against humans. And then he would play Matter Reshaper, bounce my Wormcoil Engine, and then I'd still have, Reflector Mage, I'd still have Matter Reshaper back to block, whatever. But yeah, I made a pretty bad play there. And luckily did not get punished, because later, I think again, I resolved a gigantic Walking Ballista, machine gunned his whole board, and he... Excuse me. And he conceded shortly thereafter. Keep in mind, I've had a cold this entire time. From the day I arrived in Spain till now, still got this nasty cold, so I hope that goes away soon. But yeah, I finished off. After losing round 1, I won 5 in a row, lost the second last round, and then lost my last round of day 1. So I ended up 6-2 on day 1, which was my best record ever in a Mythic Championship. I have day 2 before. I think I went 5-3 in my very first Mythic Championship on day 1. After 0-3ing the draft, I think like 5-0 standard, it was standard at the time. Maybe I got 1 win in draft and then like 4-1 standard. But anyway, it's my best record on day 1 of a Mythic Championship. Went 6-2. I was pretty happy about it. Went to sleep something around like 40th ranked, maybe in the 50th. Googled or looked up when my draft pod would be, because you can determine what your draft pod will be based on standing, because they split you up into groups of 8, starting from seed 1 all the way down. And I found out what my pod would be on day 2, and I've got that here. And sometimes you can get some real scary draft pods, but this is another situation where it wasn't as scary as it might have been. I had Marcus Luong, who's from team Cardboard Live. Maxwell Mick, which is a player that I practiced with, who coming into the tournament had the 4th highest ELO rating in the world, because he's been on quite a tear. I was up against a player named Dominic Prozek, who I didn't know. Gonzalez Garcia Sergio, I didn't recognize his name myself. Xiao Tan, I didn't recognize. Some player named Marlos. Let's see if I can do this right. Yeah, Marlos Batista Ferreira, which I didn't recognize, and a guy named Luva Rask, who I mistook for a different player named Lova Jansa. But yeah, basically, no MPL members, no like gold pros, not a terrifying draft pod. So I wasn't too scared. When it came to seeding, I was passing to Max Mick, and I knew from practicing the tournament that he hated the color white in Modern Horizons. He refused to draft it ever, and he was going to be passing white no matter what. But not super crucial information when I was going to be passing to him. I also knew he loved black cards, so had that information going into it. Let's go to my draft. So this is the draft deck I ended up drafting on day 2. My very first pick, pack 1, was a Mana War over like... I'm trying to think what the rare was. Rare was pretty bad. First picked a Mana War. Second picked a Fairy Seer, because it was another pretty bad pack. Thought I might like be able to lean into the ninjas thing. I believe I third picked Blizzard Strix, but I could be wrong about that. I think around 4 or 5 I saw Springbloom Druid, which is it's basically the best green common, a pretty strong signal as well that late. I got another Springbloom Druid in the same pack, and started seeing that maybe sort of Snow was open. I believe I got a Winter's Rest in pack 1. I think I got this Scale Up in pack 1. Yeah, it seemed like green and blue were relatively open. Pack 2, I opened Sarah the Benevolent, a Planeswalker, a very powerful one, and one that, if you can play, you should maybe trying to find a way to play. At this point, I already had 2 Springbloom Druids, and Springbloom Druid lets you when it enters the battlefield, you get to sacrifice a land, and if you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land types, put them on the battlefield. Springbloom Druid, pretty powerful card to allow you to splash, and in particular to allow you to double splash. Normally, doing something like trying to splash a double-colored card in your deck in Limited is absolute nonsense insanity, because not only do you have to draw like 2 of your colored sources to actually achieve that, but because I had 2 Springbloom Druids already, I decided to take a risk that I could double splash the Sarah the Benevolent. And as it turns out, it worked out pretty nicely. I ended up getting a 3rd Springbloom Druid in my second pack. I think I got the Blizzard Strix maybe there. I picked up some Magmatic Sinkholes. I ended up with 2 Marassa Behemoths, which go really nicely with Springbloom Druid. I ended up with a little neat package of Tribute Mage. Let's pull up Tribute Mage on the preview. Tribute Mage, along with 2 2-mana artifacts. One was a Talisman of Creativity, which aided in splashing, basically paying for my blue for some of my cards, and also these Magmatic Sinkholes that I picked up, and also this Lesser Masticore, which is just a handy creature to mow down your opponent's stuff, particularly if you have a lot of mana, which you often get to if you have triple Springbloom Druid and Talisman Creativity in your deck. So I ended up with a pretty spicy deck. I think in pack 2 I was trying to pick up Iceberg Cancrixes to try and do the whole snow mill thing. But the snow-covered lands were under a lot of pressure. I only ended up with, all told, these 4 snow-covered lands, a forest, 2 islands, and a mountain. I didn't even get a plains, which is one of the least sought-after snow-covered lands, which I would have played because I was planning to play plains anyway for Sarah. As it turns out, there was actually 3 people at the table trying to draft as many snowlands as they could. Myself, Lova Rask, and Max Mick, who I was passing to. So player across from me, myself, and the player I was passing on my left to. So it's no small wonder I didn't end up with infinite snowlands and the ability to sort of mill people out with Iceberg Cancrix. Didn't end up with a whole lot of playables because I did have to take like 4 or 5 lands relatively highly. And I had taken... I think I had taken Winter's Rest pretty early, so I was incentivized to make snow work somewhat by having some things, and then I think I also got Chiller Pillar and Blizzard Strix, so I was really interested in having some snowlands. Didn't end up with a lot, but I think 4 between the 3 Springbloom Druids is enough to play these Strix and the Winter's Rest and the Frostwalla. So this deck was actually pretty sweet. Basically, a lot of ways to get a land in my graveyard with the triple Springbloom Druid for Morass Behemoth. Also, Lester Massacre forces you to discard a card when you cast it, which also lets you put a land in your graveyard. Excuse me. I had the ability, if I drew a Springbloom Druid, to play like a turn 3 or a turn 4 Serra Benevolent. I did that quite a bit off on the play. So yeah, the deck was pretty sweet. My round 1 was against Lovarask. Turns out he was the player of the pod across from me in the pod, and he went for Snow. His plan was to Iceberg Cancrix people. And he also had a Serra the Benevolent. He was green, more green, white, splashing blue. I think he had his own Winter's Rest. He won game 1 by getting his own Serra the Benevolent, and I think Squirrel Nest, and he eventually just killed me with Serra. Games 2 and game 3, I had the Serra Benevolent first, and then just sort of ran him over with stuff. And then I think game 3, I also had Squirrel Nest and Scale Up, and so I ran him over. His game plan wasn't really to kill people with damage, with the exception of the Serra Benevolent. His plan was mostly to deck people, but I had enough threats in game 3 to kill him after resolving my own Serra. But at one point, yeah, we both had Serras out. There was Angels left and right. There was a lot of complexity going on in the Serra Snow Squirrel mirror. But in the end, I did kill him with about 3 minutes left on the clock after he had just resolved a Future Sight, which would have definitely taken over the game. But luckily, I just drawn Scale Up, and he had a relatively empty board, and I was able to kill him. Round 2, I got paired against Max Mick, my teammate, very strong player. He had just top 8'd Mythic or the Magic Fest in Seattle, which was Modern Horizons Limited. He'd done pretty well in the practice draft, so we'd done as a team. So I was pretty nervous to play against him. But he started off with some pretty terrible cards. He played he was like green black Snow. With all the Arkham's Astrolabes in the draft, and he played Nimble Mongoose, which is when you see your opponent play a Nimble Mongoose in Modern Horizons draft, it means things have not gone their way, because this card is basically terrible. It's 1 mana 1/1 with Shroud, which can become a 2/2 if you get Threshold, but it's relatively difficult to get Threshold, and even then you've done a whole lot of work to make yourself a 3/3 for 1 mana, which is just not worth doing. So I was a little confident after seeing that, and also knew that I didn't pass. I saw that Max was green-black after a little while, and I knew that I was cutting green off him pretty heavily, not passing him a lot of cards in packs 1 and 3 that were in green, so I was like, how good could his deck possibly be? Well, lucky for Max, and kind of unlucky for me, he had Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth Thran Physician is a bomb rare in Modern Horizons Limited, particularly if you have a lot of creatures to sacrifice to him, and I think he had a fair number of Putrid Goblins. So that have Persist, so you can sacrifice it once, it'll go to the graveyard and immediately come back with a -1/-1 counter through the Persist mechanic. But Yawgmoth basically demolished me in games 1 and 2. He basically sacked... I had somewhat of a board state, and I was sort of behind the 8-ball to begin with, and he started sacrificing his irrelevant creatures to put -1/-1 counters on my creatures, drawing himself a card, sort of replacing the creature he just sacrificed, and then later playing back black and discarding a land or whatever to proliferate all the -1/-1 counters that he'd put on to all of a sudden have -2/-2 counters. So he demolished me, even though I had reasonable board save. I tutored up a Lesser Masticore with a Tribute Mage, and I think at one point I even had Chiller Pillar and stuff. I think I may even resolved a Serra in game 1. He just demolished me. Same exact thing basically happened in game 2, except I had played a Serra even earlier, made a 4/4, which he's Winter's Rested, and then was able to protect Serra long enough to make a second 4/4. But meanwhile, he just chewed away my board, killed all my stuff. But the thing about the Yawgmoth is whenever you sacrifice a creature to put a -1/-1 counter on one of your creatures, you have to pay a life. That's part of it. And while Max, I think, activated Yawgmoth 6 or 7 times in game 2, and I did a little bit of damage earlier on, he was chipping away at his life total. And what ended up happening is Max tapped out. He only left up a single mana, single green mana, I think. He tapped out to play a Krosan Tusker, a 6/5. and basically had me dead on board the next turn. But what I was able to do in his end step, let's see if I can hover over it. In his end step, I was able to cast a Blizzard Strix, targeting a Winter's Rest that he had enchanted on one of my Serra Angel angels. So the way a Blizzard Strix works is, I had a snow land, so when it enters the battlefield, if you control another snow permanent, exile target permanent other than that Blizzard Strix, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So if you cast it in the end step, you can deny your opponent a permanent for your entire turn until your end step. So I targeted my opponent's Winter's Rest, it went to exile, I untapped, I got to finally untap my 4/4 Angel that had been sitting underneath Serra forever, and because Max was at 5 life, and I had a Blizzard Strix and a 4/4 attacking him, he could no longer, even though he could sacrifice some of his creatures to Yawgmoth, each time he did that, he would lose a life. So he could have, like, sacrificed 2 creatures to kill my Blizzard Strix, but then he was at 5, he would have gone to 3 and died to my 4/4 Angel. So I, like, basically stole a game from Max, despite his Yawgmoth, and he beat himself up over that play for the rest of the tournament, I'm pretty sure. Just, if all he had to do to win the game was basically leave a black, and there was no way he was going to lose. But I was able to steal with a Blizzard Strix. Game 3, he finally didn't have a Yawgmoth. I had a turn 3 Serra on the play and just sort of ran him over. I think I got a Lesser Masticore out and, like, chewed up his board. And basically, he, at some point, he played a Squirrel Nest, and I Blizzard Strix the land that the Squirrel Nest was enchanted on. Actually, he had a really good start in Game 3 because he had turn 1 suspend Crashing Footfalls, but I had, when it finally did resolve, I just Mana Warned one of the tokens and then Winter's Rest of the other one. So I basically, luckily, was able to run him over without Yawgmoth backing him up. The rest of his deck was pretty bad. I never did draw my Magmatic Sinkholes to deal with the Yawgmoths in the games that they had it, but I think I did get Magmatic Sinkhole something in Game 3. But yeah, basically the story of that match was stealing Game 2 out from under a Yawgmoth, and then Game 3 just sort of running over him despite his Crashing Footfall start. So that was a very tense match that I pulled out of the fire. And yeah, his ELO rating was gigantic at that point, 2209. My last run opponent was Marlos Batista Ferreira. He was the player on Max's left, so it was me, then Max, then this guy. I knew that this guy would probably be in white because I knew Max would pass all the white cards, and lo and behold, he was, in fact, in white. And we had a super long, grindy 2-game match. Yeah, because Game 1, my opponent was playing like a green-white creature deck, and on turn 4, he played a Force of Virtue, making all his creatures bigger, which was pretty good against my Lesser Masticore, which I played. I think what ended up happening is we both ended up in a bit of a board stall where I had like a Masticore, a whole bunch of creatures. I had a Serra that had made an Angel, and I had made a Marassa Behemoth, but my opponent was every turn making at minimum 1 Recruit the Worthy token with buyback, and eventually making 2 Recruit the Worthy tokens with buyback every turn, so making 2 2/2s a turn, quickly, like, exceeding the board state that I had, while also tapping my Scary Threats of the Marassa Behemoth and the Angel with his creature, Zalfrin Decoy. The combination of Recruit the Worthy and Zalfrin Decoy means you have a creature on the battlefield on your opponent's turn, and then you can activate Zalfrin Decoy to tap their best creature on their turn so that you don't get attacked by the entire thing. Eventually, excuse me, all the while that was happening, I was like attacking with a Belling Elk that I was turning into a 4/4 Indestructible Trample by dashing a Treetop Ambusher and just not attacking with it, and at the end of the turn it would turn back to my hand. So that was like going on, like I was attacking with a 4/4, and I still had the threat of like pinging stuff with the Lesser Masticore that was kind of an empty threat because the opponent had Force of Virtue out, so all his stuff had 2 toughness. So that was going on. I was slowly building on a board, I was chipping away at his life total, and we finally reached a point where I had 2 Serra the Benevolent Angels and a Marassa Behemoth, and he was a relatively low life total, and a Belling Elk, and all I had to do was attack with everything, because there was no way for him to tap both my Angels and also live through a Marassa Behemoth attack. What ended up happening instead is my opponent made the Recruit the Worthy token. He used his Zalfrin Decoy to tap one of my Angels. I attacked with my other Angel and the Marassa Behemoth, and then my opponent destroyed me with Wing Shards, a card that I knew I passed to the left, and also I should have thought about much earlier. But basically, Wing Shard says target player sacrifices an attacking creature. It has Storm. So because my opponent had cast Recruit the Worthy and then a Wing Shards, I had to sacrifice 2 creatures, which were the only 2 attacking creatures I had, which was like a lethal, what would have been a lethal attack. All I had to do in that situation was just attack with everything, and he was definitely dead because I could have just sacrificed my random like Treetop Ambusher that was getting blocked by his other stuff. So I got destroyed. He killed my Marasa Behemoth and my Serra, but luckily, I still had a big enough board state that the next turn I did go for an Alpha Strike, and my opponent felt it necessary at that point to cast Recruit the Worthy 3 times, once with buyback, a second time with buyback, and then a third time. Finally, removing his engine. He couldn't buy back at a third time, so he'd finally cast all his Recruit the Worthies. I made an attack, and because I still had a Lesser Mastercore out, it ended up being a fairly complicated attack for him to block. And I ended up sort of on the upper end of it with still having like Pondering Mage, a whole bunch of stuff. And because his Recruit the Worthy plan was gone, I was then able to kill him the subsequent turn because I had like a better board state, and he no longer had his engine to create more and more creatures. But it was a bit of a like I should have Alpha Strike the turn before to guarantee win, and then like made a somewhat risky Alpha Strike the next turn and was able to win from that point on. Game 2 was not nearly as hard for me because, again, I had a quick Lesser Mastercore. My opponent had a board full of 1 toughness creatures. He had... I can't think of the name of it. I wonder if I can search for it with just this. Yeah, he had a whole bunch of Imposter the Six Prides, and I was able to like play a Mastercore and start shooting them all down because he didn't have the Force of Virtue that time. And eventually I think I got like a Squirrel Nest out. I got like a Marasa Behemoth out. Yeah, I had Bellowing Elk, Lesser Mastercore going after him, making like squirrels to make my Bellowing Elk indestructible. He went for a turn after I attacked with Marasa Behemoth, Bellowing Elk, and Lesser Mastercore. He went for a turn where he went for Wing Shards. Target player sacrifices an attacking creature, so I sacrificed my Lesser Mastercore because it has Persist, and I didn't really care. It was the smallest creature. It was a 2/2 instead of a 4/2. And an 8/8 that was attacking him. So I sacrificed the Mastercore, and in response to the Persist for some reason, it didn't really matter when he did this, he cast a second Wing Shards, which meant, so the first one only made me sacrifice 1 thing, and the second one would have a Storm count of 1, so this one would make a copy, so I would have to then sacrifice 2 things, but luckily I had, at that point, a Blizzard Strix in my hand and a Snowland. Let's hover over the Blizzard Strix. So what I then did is I cast Blizzard Strix, targeted my own Marasa Behemoth to exile it from combat. I then sacrificed my Bellowing Elk, and then at the end, at my end step, I ended up with a Blizzard Strix and an 8/8 still. So I basically sort of he still got to kill my Bellowing Elk, but he traded 2 Wing Shards for half of a Lesser Mastercore and my Bellowing Elk, and that was basically all the removal spells he had, and I was able to then kill him with Strix and Marasa Behemoth at that point. So that was... I had to play tight. A Blizzard Strix was an amazing card for me. I had a relatively strong deck. I think I killed a lot of his stuff with Magnetic Sinkhole as well in the second game. Like, my deck really just fired on all cylinders in game 2 against my draft finals opponent. And it's, like, as you move through a draft, it gets harder and harder because the other people you play have also won twice. So, yeah, I basically won my draft with a pretty sweet deck and was all of a sudden 9-2. And starting to think about reaching an 11-win record. Because once you're at 11 wins at a Mythic Championship, you qualify for the next Mythic Championship. And the next one, I was not, to that point, qualified for Richmond. And so I was trying to like set my goals sort of at reasonable points. Like, first I want to get my 11 wins so I can qualify for Richmond. And then if I can conquer that, then we start thinking about top 8. So then after 3-0ing the draft, which again... So I had already got my best draft performance ever at a Pro Tour Mythic Championship by 2-1ing the Day 1 draft, and then I one-upped myself by 3-0ing the Day 2 draft. So that was pretty amazing. I was feeling pretty good about that. And then my luck continues to roll my way because then I got paired against Alan Wu in the in round 12 in Modern. And the reason I say that was lucky is because Alan was... I should just use Alan, I guess. Alan was playing Is It Phoenix again, the same, almost exact same deck that I had played against Shota Yasuoka, who I beat in 3 games. And basically the same thing happened against Alan. I played a lot of Chalices. There was one game where he was able to get some Phoenixes out early and punish me, but the The other games, my ley lines and stuff in my chalices took care of things. My All Is Dust cleared away his things in the ice and his Arya Flame, and I was able to defeat him 2-1, moving myself up to 10 wins. So then, at 10 wins, I knew I had equivalent of 4 PTQ finals. If I won any of the next 4 rounds from 10 wins, I know I was qualifying for Richmond. So I was starting to set my sights on that. Again, I got a positive pairing, although a little bit of a disappointment that I was paired down. So Arnaud Hochmiller had actually gone 8-0 on day 1. He was playing Blue Eye Control, a matchup I did want to face because I have tools like Chalice the Void and Thought Not Seer in a relatively aggressive deck with Reality Smashers and Karn. Like, I'm pretty hard for control decks to deal with. They do have stuff like Field of Ruin that can disrupt Tron lands, but because Eldrazi Tron is sort of a mid-range deck, it's not all in on the Tron lands. It's not as disruptive against other decks, so I was pretty happy to face Arnaud Hochmiller. I resolved the Chalice on game 1 and just killed him with a Reality Smasher. Attacked him a bunch of times, and he couldn't do anything about it. He just kept drawing Path to Exiles and other 1-drops that he couldn't get around. Game 2 was a very tight game, a lot of back and forth, and eventually reached a point where he had just more Planeswalkers than I had answers to them and threats, and I think he ended up killing me with... Yeah, at one point he did a cool play where he Vendilion clicked me when he had a Narset out in my draw step, so I've drawn my card, and then he gets to take whatever card he wants from my hand, and then I don't draw a replacement, which you normally would with Vendilion click because of the static text on Narset, so that was pretty sweet. And then game 3 was a very good back and forth where I think I was containing his Planeswalkers. I wasn't able to get a Chalice on 1, so his Path to Exiles were live and actually took out a lot of my Eldrazi. I had a decision point at one point where I Thought Not Seared him, and there was a Path to Exile in his graveyard, and his hand was Teferi, a 5-mana Teferi or Snapcaster, and I really tanked hard on that, and I ended up taking the Teferi, which meant that he was able to then Snapcaster my Thought Knot and sort of kill it, but I thought it was more important to make sure that Teferi didn't resolve because it represented a lot more cards. Overall, it was a pretty tough decision. Let's pull up his deck while we're talking about it. I have to go back here. H-O-C-K. Okay. Yeah, so he's Blue Eye Control. Post-board, he brought in Winds of Abandon, which he used to some effect against me, and he also brought in multiple... He brought in his Monastery Mentors and his Vendilion clicks. Against Eldrazi Tron, with Eldrazi Tron against Blue Eye Control, at least the deck list I was playing, you don't really change that many cards. I think I maybe shaved on some Endbringers or something like that. But a lot of your cards are already pretty good. You're kind of pre-boarded for the Blue Eye Control matchup, so my deck was pretty good. Basically, what ended up happening against Hochmiller is I was able to chip away at his life total, and sort of battle through his counter spells, got him pretty low. He eventually had Jace and Monastery Mentor in play, whereas I was at 6 life. I forced him to counter something and then resolved a Karn and -2'd Karn for a Walking Ballista, which would have been lethal because he was at 3 life, but I just needed to untap and have enough mana to cast it. And then Hochmiller in his end step cast an Opt, which made a Monk token with Monastery Mentor, and untapped, and had the ability, he had basically 6 lands. He had a Celestial Colonnade, a Monastery Mentor, and a 1/1 token. And there was the potential, maybe, that he could deal 16 damage to me in one attack, which would have been absolutely devastating, because what I had in play, let's pull it up. What I had in play was a Expedition map, which I hadn't cracked yet, and the ability to search up a Cavern of Souls, which I can then use, put into play naming Construct, and then be able to cast an uncounterable Walking Ballista for X=4 and deal less points of damage. And that's exactly what happened. He didn't have enough damage to kill me. He said he was 2 spells short. I was able to untap Walking Ballista and kill him, and that was, boom. That was my PTQ win, basically. I beat Hochmiller. That qualified me for Richmond, and all of a sudden I was now at 11 wins. And now I was in a position where if I won any of the next 2, I could top 8. Excuse me. So the next round was... So things are starting to get exciting. I tried to at the end of day 1 with 6-2, I sort of had lowish expectations. I was mostly aimed at, okay, I need to, I was well, in order to top 8, I need to 7-1. That's pretty hard. or 6-2 again, maybe. I figured 5-3 was sort of the record I was eyeballing because I really just wanted that re-queue for Richmond. But once I was at 11 wins, I started to set my sights on top 8ing. So the next round, pairings occur seeded across from actually Alvaro Fernandez Torres, the guy who I inevitably end up playing in the semifinals. But then, and I see, and there's like a long wait because at table like 3 or wherever we were, table 2 maybe, because there's not a lot of 11 and 2 players at that point, so a lot of us were expected to get called to the feature match area. There's a bit of a wait while we expect one of our tables to get called to the feature match area. During that time, judges came over and repaired our 4 tables. So it was like tables 2, 3, 4, and 5 all got repaired. The probable reason for that is there was a transcription error of the paper match result slips that have to be handed in at the end of every round. That's how they communicate what's going on in the tournament to the scorekeeper. You and your opponent fill out a match slip and you bring it up to the table, and then they have to manually enter that into their Wizards event reporter. And so what probably happened is that either they transcribed the match slip wrong, or there was some error in the match slip itself that was somehow resolvable, but as a result, there was a miniature repair. What they do in these high-profile and large tournaments is they try to avoid repairing the entire tournament. Maybe at a smaller, like, LGS tournament or an FNM, they'll just repair the whole tournament if there's been an error. But these smaller ones, because it's a huge logistical challenge to repair, like, hundreds of people, they try to do a minimal repair whenever they can. So they repaired the 4 of us. A conspiracy theorist would think, because John Finkel was one of the pairings, that they were like trying to repair such that John Finkel got a better favorable matchup, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just think some sort of error occurred. But it was an amazing stroke of luck for me because I was originally paired against Alvaro Fernandez Torres, which was on hard scales, which, as we'll find out later, not a very good matchup for Eldrazi. Instead, I got to play David Mines, and I got to then our match actually got called in the feature match area, and that was exciting. So now we move on to actual on-camera feature matches. All of this has been talking at this point, and now we have the real deal on camera. So David Mines. So this is my first ever on-camera feature match in a Magic tournament hosted by Wizards of the Coast. So I've been to all sorts of Magic Fests and Grand Prix in the past. I've done well at one of them, basically, at Top 4 GP San Jose. And even there, when we were playing in the semifinals there, we did not appear on camera at any point because they preferred to show another match instead. So I'd never been in this situation where you're on the feature match area, there's 20,000 people watching you, there's like a zillion judges, there's bright lights, there's like 6 cameras facing you. It's a very stressful situation. So again, I'm layering on the excuses. Haven't been getting a lot of sleep. I was very sick, terrified of the feature match area, very nervous, playing what would appear to be actually also a win and in, because the winner of this match would go to 12 wins, presumably could find a draw in the round afterward, which would then lock for top 8. So this is basically a win and in for top 8. Very exciting match. Playing Eldrazi against David Mines on Jund.
Oh, Canada, eh? So look.
So, I win the die roll, which is also important in Modern. I win the die roll, I'm on the play, and I keep a hand that's Urza's Mine, Chalice of the Void, Urza's Mine, Chalice of the Void, Cavern of Souls, Dismember, 2 mana reshapers. The reason I keep this hand, this is a 6-card hand. 1, 2, 3, or no, it's a 7-card hand. So the various things line into this, why I kept this hand. 1, I know I'm against Jund, and trying to mulligan for some crazy, like, Tron Lance plus Karn or something just falls flat in the face of the card Thoughtseize, or Inquisition of Kozilek. My general strategy against Jund, which has served me well, is to try and keep a reasonable hand that is interactive, that doesn't rely too heavily on like one card, and in general try to keep a large quantity of cards as well if you can, because you know your hand is going to lose some of the cards either to Thoughtseize, Inquisition, or Liliana the Veil. So that was part of the reason I kept this hand. Another reason is to have double Dismember to stave off like a quick Tarmogoyf, for maybe if he has Dark Confidant or something, although I knew he doesn't have Dark Confidant. And then the other reason I kept this hand is because Matter Reshaper is an amazing card in the matchup for Etron against Jund, because Matter Reshaper is really annoying for them. It's a 3/2 that replaces itself when it dies. It can pressure their Renin 6 and their Liliana the Veil, and it's just an awesome card that basically draws a card when it dies, pressures their Planeswalkers, and is just annoying for them in general. So that's all the reasons why I kept this hand, and I think is a basically almost the textbook hand you'd want against Tron. The only way to make it better would be have the same stuff but have Tron lands in it.
Viewers around the world as we get underway here with Gifford on Eldrazi Tron and Mindsy on Jund. Viewers around the world will be used to unbiased professional.
So I'm going to skip
highly
through it a little bit. So you can hear the commentators. It's Riley Knight, who's Australian, and the other commentator in the booth is Eduardo Sajgalik, who's Canadian. So Riley was trying to play up the whole country country rivalry between ourselves and the casters, but it didn't really go well. So here's the case in point: Inquisition of Kozilek on turn 1.
Neutral.
And David gets to take a card from my hand. We get to clearly see the contents of my hand, which is Chalice the Void, 2 Dismembers, Cavern, like I said.
Well, if you want to watch the steamroll, it's here. Pay attention to those matter reshapers.
And there's Eduardo mentioning how important matter reshaper is.
So what happens?
And so mine's because I have 2 copies of Matter Reshaper, 2 copies of Dismember, and only 1 copy of Chalice the Void, and it was going to be my turn 2 play. He decides to just take Chalice the Void.
Inquisition of Kozilek is issue wants to 1, but only if Sean Gifford can prevent him.
So on my turn, I just draw a Thought Knot. I have no plays. I need another land really badly in order to cast anything. I can still cast my Dismembers with 1 man, but I really want to get these Matter Reshapers going. I draw no lands. I just draw a Thought Knot Seer, and I say go.
Paper just flies in the face of that, right?
If we look at mine's hand, he's got land.
Always providing value, even in the
3
face
lands.
Of removal.
He shocks himself.
Thicket finds us like Jund here. Mines is going to
cycle
a
Brooding Catacombs.
Thicket, finds a surgical extraction.
He's got surgical extraction. So his hand is now surgical. Surgical, which he's just drawn. Lightning Bolt, and Bloodbraid Elf. So he doesn't have much going on. And if I start resolving these Matter Reshapers, things are going to go badly for him.
Although we've seen it do some work against Tron in the past.
Yeah, it's not at its best in this. Yeah, that was a great game.
And I draw all his stuff. Absolute worst draw I could possibly have. 7-mana card. I need 3rd land just to cast Matter Reshaper. Eldrazi Temple will allow me to cast Thought Knot Seer. Just an absolute brick.
That was a.
So now mine's. He draws.
I guess poor draw sequencing.
A Tarmogoyf, and he's considering casting it. But he knows about the 2 Dismembers in my hand, and he knows I'll immediately just Dismember this, and he decides to not cast it at all.
Access to red mana, which, I mean, the
and
Lightning Bolt is fine
tap
in
land
the sense
go.
that there's time.
I draw an Eldrazi Temple.
But the main problem...
So now I can cast either Thought Knot Seer or the Matter Reshapers. Eldrazi Temple is an amazing draw for me. And I have a couple decisions. I could go for Thought Knot, and if my opponent has... I could go for Thought Knot and take my opponent's best card. If my opponent has, Fetch Land, Fatal Push, next turn he can just kill the Thought Knot immediately. If he untaps and draws Liliana of the Veil, he could play that and -2 immediately and kill my Thought Knot. You can often get punished if you play a Thought Knot into an empty board against Liliana of the Veil deck, even though it's clear that, because he probably would have played Liliana of the Veil on 3 if he had it, but it's somewhat clear he maybe doesn't have it in his opening hand. I went for the Matter Reshaper here. It's not 100% mana efficient, but the safest play into the unknown contents of my opponent's hand. That could, and he had 2 mana up at the same time, by the way, so he could have responded to the Thought Knot with removal spells.
Bad news, however, for
so David draws a Thoughtseize up top of his library, which allows him to do the play of Thoughtseize, one of my Dismembers, and Surgical Extraction, the other one.
So important,
which is pretty good, 2 for 2.
Unfortunately, it's 5.
But
David Mines can engineer a situation to.
And he can also resolve his Tarmogoyf this turn.
On the opponent's hand here.
There's a long
because you fought to with the Mines
play. He does that.
One on David Mines.
And then he plays his
Tarmogoyf.
So I'm suddenly pretty far behind.
And that's a temple.
His Tarmogoyf is we got Artifact, Instant, Sorcery. So it's a 3/4 right now, so it's larger than my Matter Reshaper, so I can't really attack. So I just keep drawing cards. I draw another Eldrazi Temple, which means my all his dust is now actually in the realm of playability, because Eldrazi Temples can tap for 2 for all his dust because it's an Eldrazi spell. So right now, drawing that all his dust means that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana towards my 7 mana sorcery, so that's pretty exciting. But also, it's just an additional mana that allows me to finally cast my Thought Knot Seer.
So Thought Knot Seer comes down.
One of the big
and I take I just take the Bloodbraid Elf from my opponent's hand because I don't really care about Lightning Bolt. Sure, Lightning Bolt could hit my Matter Reshaper, but it can't really hit my Thought Knot. And basically, I want to keep my Thought Knot alive because if my opponent kills my Thought Knot, not only do they kill my 4/4, they also get to draw a card when Thought Knot dies. So I just take the Bloodbraid Elf pretty simply there.
And if deal with the Matter decides to attack damage,
David untaps.
Can't block, but then I'm going to come back. It can be
plays his
for
Nurturing
Pay
Peatland,
option for
cycles
David
it,
Mines. Now,
thinks
Gifford
for a
has
while, decides not to
Trophy
attack.
can be especially against something like a
Or
Real
does he?
Dust.
Yeah, he decides to attack. I just take it because he's at 16.
Against just
He's cast
Tarmogoyf,
a
but it
Thought
means that
Seize.
you need to draw a discard spell before you draw.
And then
sure,
he kills.
staying ahead on cuts.
He's drawing Assassin's Trophy. Assassin's Trophy my Thought Knot, and I get a Wastes from that.
because the interaction.
And then David plays a Blackcleave Cliffs,
Right, but the
which either himself or the judge notices the second land he played, and chat also went insane at this point too, which is, but yeah, so we realize, and he has to back up to
might have
pick
said
that back
go
up.
without playing the land with
Red Source
And
next
then
turn.
I
Now,
untap.
we'll see how heavily
What do
he's
I draw
punished for
here?
that blood out on.
go without
Just draw
goes
waste.
over the top 10. This could be an issue.
Yeah, that's gonna make.
Yeah, I
it
draw
Mines
waste. So now I have my
misses
7
out
mana
on
for All His
an
Dust. I'm not going
Red
to
Source
just
next
cast an All His Dust on
turn.
a single
Now,
Tarmogoyf,
we'll
which
see
is
how heavily
only
he's punished
now a
for that. Blood
4/5.
Elf not
So I
available
just
to
attack
enough
for 3 and
as
play
it
my other Mana
turns.
Reshaper.
Well,
So
it
yeah.
is a 5.
And
Yeah,
now
and I know
David,
you damage for
he's just drawn more lands. He's got a Bolt. He had to play his Blackcleave Cliffs tapped because he has more than 4 lands. And he
This
stays
is
back
not
with a Tarmogoyf.
only
At
when
this point, because I've got 6 power in play and David's at 13 life, I decide, you know what, now is probably a good enough time for me to All His Dust, because I can All His Dust, kill the Goyf, and swing for 6 and put him basically almost dead. I put him to 7, a 1 point short of another swing to kill him, and I decide it's worthy of doing it, so
additional threat.
Gifford, I think this is smart. Get that.
I All His Dust,
He is,
swing for
gone.
6,
2 lands.
We
hold
live
up
in a
Ghost
world where
Quarter,
it's too slow.
just in
It's too
case
slow.
there's some
We need
land
those
that he destroy and
nurturing
say go.
peatlands. Here is now a
David Mines rips a Liliana, which is pretty good.
Liliana over the
You know,
veil.
could be
Absolutely
better,
excellent.
but it's not great against Matter Reshaper because, as I've said before, every time Matter Reshaper dies, you reveal top card of your library. If it's 3 CMC or less, you put it. You have a choice of putting it on the battlefield, or you could put it in your hand. And if it's more than 3 CMC, you can always just put it in your hand. So Matter Reshaper
Going
really
against
good
a card
against
like
Jund and good
Fallout
against
Zero,
Liliana
much
too.
worse against Matter
Against
Reshaper.
So I sacrifice one of the Matter
That
Reshapers, and I
sacrifice a creature,
reveal,
away
I
goes
think,
Matter
just a
Reshaper,
Blast
see what
Zone.
we flip
Yeah,
on.
Blast Zone, which I put into
with
play
that
with a
lightning
counter
bolt,
on
that
it.
Liliana won't have pressure, and then
And
he
it
can
says
start
go.
take for dip and taking.
best in this
I
matchup.
go to my
He's
turn.
gonna
Opponent is at 7. I decide to just
play
attack
the ball well.
Liliana.
Other
Yeah, decides
He
in
bolts
it
in
comes,
response. We reveal
silhouettes
another
off
card at
the
the top, and I
top,
think it's a land
Falsely,
again. So now I have
and-
Tron.
It's Tron.
We got Tron online.
So I
just
have
like
a
that.
lot of
Now,
mana available to me. Urza's Tron, Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant all being in play is equal to 7 mana because each of them now all of a sudden tap for more mana. They go from tapping from 1 mana to tapping for 2 or 3 mana in the case of Tower. So I have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 mana. I have so much mana, I just need
On
something to
turn
do with all of
400.
it.
Yeah, and not much to do with it.
And I think I've just had wastes in my hand.
Tireless tracker. Both
Mines
players are
draws a
playing
really
off
good
the
card,
top
just
of their
Tireless
deck.
Tracker, which allows him to turn the fetch land in his hand
That
into
can't-
additional card
actually,
draw.
makes this tireless tracker really.
The only good thing going on for me here is that both Tireless Tracker and Liliana of the Veil are 3 mana, so my Blast Zone can tick up to
Risky
3 and kill them the next turn.
process.
Yeah, you just come. They crack the
And
blast zone. There.
David cracks some
the Liliana by
clues
itself,
after
it's
playing
not
lands
right?
and
It's
so on.
I love the.
Because
Drawn another one.
tireless tracker will go away. There might
And David and
Bit of a
I,
spot for David Mines. I think he's found.
David doesn't. See, what David should have maybe done
Another tile. I love the option.
was
Pressure.
I do wonder since the Liliana
make the second clue right now and draw the card, but he didn't
might
do
have
that.
been.
Liliana and the tireless tracker.
At the end step, I put 2 counters of Blast Zone and say go.
Top of Gifford's library. Not
Basically, I don't want to be the first person to blink, because what could happen is if I pop my Blast Zone on my opponent's turn, my opponent cracks his fetch land, gets a land into play, makes a clue for Tireless Tractor, uses his 2 mana to activate it. Yeah, I'm Baker. Yeah, I didn't want to blink first despite being blinky. Cracks his fetch land, gets a land, puts it in play, gets the trigger on Tireless Tracker to make a clue, and then he gets to use that 2 mana to sacrifice that clue and draw a card. What instead I did was I waited to my opponent's turn to pop the Blast Zone. And he can't crack that land until I've used Blast Zone because I could deny him the clue. So I wait till my
Not treating
opponent's
him
turn
very
to deny him
generous somewhere.
2 mana. And also there's the potential that maybe he draws the last fetchable land. I don't really know the contents of his land. It's impossible to keep that much detailed information about your opponent's deck list in your head, even though you've seen it at the start of the match. But
The
I just go for
card that
draw
Sean
step.
really wants is either
pop the Blast
Walking
Zone to, like,
Ballista, since
reset
that would
the
probably end
board
the game
here.
with the amount of mana here.
And here I'm saying we're doing in his upkeep, but I did say draw step, so I'm like, I said draw step, draw your card first, and then I'll pop this.
And also, it's worth pointing out, there's
So
4 cards in the
he
Great Quarter,
draws. Important to note that he drew a Tireless Tracker off the first clue crack, and he's just trying to Liliana.
but,
So
this is kind of an interesting spot. Wait. Yeah, so one thing, David Mines didn't crack that fetch land immediately.
So, like,
probably
I get the
trying to
upside
respond
of
to Blast
him
Zone.
So in the draw step,
being down
I
2
believe this is
mana
in
in
the
his
draw
draw
step here, so mine's drew a
step.
card,
He doesn't have
and
to
then
crack
the
a clue, but at least
activation of the blast zone.
I
I
make
think
him
that's just a
do
very
this
techie
right
play
now.
there
He doesn't
from
have to
Gifford,
crack clue.
hoping
I
that
denied
might
him 2
draw
mana on the
something he wanted
previous
to
turn.
fetch
It's a dumb little thing.
with the Bloodstone Mire. Ultimately irrelevant. There's a basic.
And I want to do it
Mount.
now
Is
before he
mismatched.
plays
I will
another
talk
land
to
because
him
I don't
about
want to
this
make even more
afterwards.
clues off
And another clue token
the
before
Talus Tracker.
the
So
Talus
this is the
Tracker
last point at
and
which I was
the
willing
Liliana.
to
How is it mismatched?
leave the
It's
three
look at the other basics, man.
Oh,
He found
CMC
Battle for
creature
Zendikar.
or
wow, you
permanents
are
in
a
play.
purist.
Mate, come on.
Her and Liliana.
And here I have a bit of a chuckle as he just resolves a Talus Tracker and a Liliana again. We're right back to the board set I just finished clearing up. And
Be a
then
Talus Tracker and give
I
it-
draw a decent card, I
David's
believe.
like, I don't think so, mate. I don't think so.
However, Karn the Great Creator would still be extremely powerful here. Something like getting
Oh,
Karn
no.
the Great
I draw
Creator and Mycos and
Plain Jane,
Flatus.
Yeah.
Matter Reshape.
Yeah,
The
that
opponent is
problem
at
is
6
there's
life,
a
so
full-
even
there's
the
a
3-power
creature in
creature is
play
somewhat
that
relevant, but I'd
just
much
deal
rather
with
draw. You know, look at all this
So,
mana I have. I
Matter
think
Reshaper comes
I'd have
down
figured
here.
7, 8,
Mines will
9.
have, a choice as to
7,
what he
8, 9,
wants to
10,
do
11,
next.
12, 13
Of course,
mana,
Matter Reshaper
and if
will
it
provide
happens to be
extra value for
Eldrazi
Gifford.
mana,
They've
I've
done a
got
lot of
7,
heavy
8,
lifting here for the
9,
Canadian.
10, 11, 12,
But
13,
Minesy
14, 15 Eldrazi
the
mana, so I've
driver's
got
seat,
crazy amounts of mana. I
Liliana
would
as
rather
well,
have something
and
more
an
impactful
active
than a Matter
Talus
Reshaper,
Tracker,
but
second
I
clue
settle for
token
it.
here. Upstairs goes Liliana.
Meanwhile, he's just
Yeah,
going
this
off,
is,
drawing
just
cards
go
left and
upstairs
right
here because,
with clues and
making
Liliana
the
and all this
Matter Reshaper
nonsense, drawing little
sacrifice is
lands.
not really a threat. The Matter Reshaper on a key card like
And he's
walking
drawing a
Liliana's
Fatal
ability
Push,
right away.
which
It
doesn't
meant
kill
that
Matter
if you found
Reshaper.
removal for the Matter Reshaper on a key card. Had you
And I think he decides to
Talus
attack me,
Tracker
which
and
is
attack.
completely correct in taking the damage.
pretty interesting.
Here
And
it's
here's
much
where I
better
draw a
defend
good
the
card.
Matter Reshaper. And even something like
Or no,
Reality Smasher can
I
really
draw
cause
a
trouble.
Mind
That
Stone.
looks to
It's a
me
redraw,
like
so
a-
Mind Stone is a 2-mana artifact that can tap for colorless,
Nah,
or
they
you
play
can
Mind Stone.
tap a
It's
colorless
basically
and
that.
it to draw
It does
cards.
look
So I
a
draw
lot
Mind
like
Stone, get a
Chromatic
redraw.
Old Print
Now I
Invasion
draw a
with
good
the-
card.
The boy with the goggles on.
Oh, the Chromatic Sphere Invasion.
I think
Frame
I
is
drew in
great.
all
Yeah,
his
exactly.
dust.
It looked a little bit like that.
Oh,
but
no,
just
you're
a
talking about the
Mind Stone.
mirrored.
So I don't know the content of David's hand. I know he's at 6 life.
Here's the mind.
I know if it's I'm going to cast an All His Dust right now, and because I know I'm going to do that, and I know he can't make me discard a card right now, I decided to attack him
Mind Stone now.
Yeah,
before
Fred and
casting the All His
would
Dust in
David mind at
case
6. All his dust off the top.
Is that
In
what
case,
we've just seen here?
he
All his
wants to
dust
do
just
something.
like that, and David
and it
Mine's
works
all
out
of a
well
sudden
for me
well
because
and truly on the
casting All His
back
Dust
foot.
triggers
Wow, he's
Revolt,
put on a
which
performance
by
here.
removing his Talus
Gifford
Tracker and his Liliana, which
with
now
a
turns on
clutch
the
draw there
Fatal
very
Push that he
late
just
in the
drew.
piece.
Going to
But
use
now-
that fatal push.
But
end
again,
of
he's killing.
turn.
This is my 4th Matter Reshaper, by the way, I think. And he kills yet another card that draws a card when it dies.
Also
And
the
I
Revolt.
just so happened to draw. Wait for
There
it.
goes the Matter Reshaper. Let's
Wait
see
for
what
it.
hits off the top.
Karn,
Oh,
the Great
it's a
Creator.
Karn, the Great Creator.
And as
David
mentioned, I have
Mines
13
needs to
friggin'
draw
mana,
a
so
discard spell
I need
or
him
the
to
game
not
will
take this
end
card out
next
of my
turn.
hand, and I
Next
can
turn,
basically
Mines
win
has
next
no
turn.
action, and off the top it's Ren and 6.
That's just not going to do
So
it.
David draws a
There's
Ren and
nothing-
6. He pluses to get back Nurturing Peatland, or to get back the different cycle land, cycles it, and
One
draws a
second.
Scavenging Ooze. So now, let's see here.
It is a creature in play, so you
He's gonna
can't
play
log
a
with Karn
Scavenging
is
Ooze,
to
and
get
then he's gonna
Walking
play a
Ballista,
fetch land.
Plenty of mana.
Yeah.
So David's at 4. He's got 1 untapped green source and the ability to take 3 life, I think, to get
David
another
wants a
untapped
free,
green
Make a
source.
million bid.
So basically, he can go to 4 pretty easily. So all I have to do is untap, tap 4 mana for Karn, -2, get a Walking Ballista, and I've got, I think I had 13 mana. Let's check it. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I have 9 mana remaining. I just -2, get a Walking Ballista, and play a 4/4 Walking Ballista and shoot him 4 times to kill him. And his Scavenging Ooze can move his life up to 4, and then the fetch line it doesn't even break even on life. So that's all I really had to do. But you know, I'm in the feature match area. Things are going well for me. I'm definitely far ahead. And I draw a Reality Smasher. And so there's like, because I drew the Reality Smasher, now another line enters my mind, and it's the line to go for the Mycosynthellatus lock, which is the very first opportunity I've ever had in the entire tournament to go for the lock. Most of the rest of the time, I was just killing people with Walking Ballistas and Thought Knots and stuff, and Karn was just doing value stuff for me. Finally, I have an opportunity to go for a Mycosynthellatus lock, and I wasn't going to let that opportunity go away from me on camera. There was about a zillion ways to win from here, and that's sort of the blessing and the curse of having a tutor card in your deck with Karn the Great Creator, is the complexity of all the various options you have. But yeah, the most straightforward one, the fastest one, is this Karn minus for Walking Ballista. The other thing that I went for is play Reality Smasher, Karn minus for Mycosynthellatus, and play it. Attack him. That therefore removes his ability to cast any spells from that point. And the largest that this the Scavenging Ooze can get to is a 4/4 because he has 2 green mana available to him, and he's at 3 life. So he could like crack fetch, or he'd have to exile something, go up to 4 life, crack fetch down to 1 life, exiling another thing, go up to 2 life. He'd have a 4/4 Scavenging Ooze, but I'd have a 5/5 Reality Smasher that attacks him. He has to chump block with Scavenging Ooze, and then he can no longer cast any spells because I got Mycosynth Lattice Lock. So, and you know, people in chat were like, "Oh my God, he punted all this stuff," and it's just the matter. The fact of the matter is, there's about 1,000 ways for me to win the game from there, and he scoops shortly thereafter. And I partly wanted to play the friggin' Mycosynth Lattice Lock, because it's the most splashy play in your deck, and I wanted to do it for camera, and it was a winning line anyway, so I went for it there. So what people see here, I think, is people in chat see me put Mycosynth Lattice into my library, and then they cut away for a while. And so that was the thing I was doing all the time during testing, was like accidentally putting my tutor targets back into my library, because you have to restore them to the sideboard if you intend for them to stay in your sideboard for post-board games. So people in chat saw me do that, and then they don't now see me, realize, like, almost immediately after the camera cut away, to take the Lattice back out of my sideboard, back out of my main deck, and put it in my sideboard, because that's, like, not a card you want to have in your main deck. And so the whole chat was like, oh my God, he's going to submit a legal deck, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, don't worry, I sideboarded intentionally, and so here's how I sideboarded. Let's just get to the start of my match again. So against John rather, and particularly David Mines' John. Let's pull his John list up. Mines, S. Eldo. So I saw Vraska Golgari Queen. That can destroy Chalice of the Void. I saw Abrupt Decay. That can destroy Chalice of the Void. I saw Assassin's Trophy. That can destroy Chalice of the Void. And I saw Engineered Explosives. That can destroy Chalice of the Void. All those reasons, some of them on different converted mana costs, and the fact of the matter is that the Chalice of the Void is not great against Tron to begin with. They have a wide variety of mana costs. 2 is the most impactful number, because that's where Ren and 6, Scavenging Ooze, Tarmogoyf, and Assassin's Trophy are, but still, that's a 4 mana play for Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void doesn't help you. It's not particularly good top deck, which a lot of time against John you end up top decking. It's not particularly good at defending you from a quick Tarmogoyf or things like that. So I decided to shave all the Chalices. Let's go to my deck. So I cut all the Chalices. And basically then it's a matter of, well, what cards do I want to bring in? Once you've committed to cutting 4 cards, sometimes it's hard for this singleton deck or sideboard to actually bring in 4 good cards. So I made the decision to bring in Spatial Contortion, because I saw Collector Oof in his sideboard, and also he had multiple main deck Tireless Trackers, and I figured I needed an answer to be able to kill a Tireless Tracker, especially because we saw Impactful it wasn't game 1. So I brought in Spatial Contortion. I brought in Mystic Forge, this is the reason why Mystic Forge is in my deck. It's basically for the Jund matchup. I figured it's a little slow if you have to tutor for it. You have to play Karn, then minus, then play it, but it's not so bad if you just play it on 4. So that's another reason to put it into my deck and not my sideboard. And it's a pretty powerful card. Card Draw Engine, so I brought that in. Brought in the Wormcoil Engine, because another pretty sweet card against Jund. They have to grind through it. It takes like 2 removal spells to get rid of both Death Touch creatures. I could block Tarmogoyf and things like that. And then I had a hard time remembering what the last card I brought in, but I think it was probably Walking Ballista. I guess no, it wasn't. I know later on that it wasn't. So I must have brought in, for the last card, must have been the Basilisk Collar. Because the Collar can also help me trade for Tarmogoyfs, and I can put it on a Matter Reshaper and attack their Planeswalkers and stuff. So yeah, I think I must have brought in the Collar. What I maybe should have just done is cut 3 Chalices and just brought these 3 in, because the Collar is somewhat of a lateral play. But anyway, that's what I brought in for post board. Now we'll go back to the match.
On the left-hand side
so now I'm on the draw, and I get Thoughtseize on turn 1. And again, I keep a very just safe hand that has mana and spells. It's basically what you want against Jund if you're playing another mid-range deck, and it's like, this is a beautiful hand. I would take this hand 1,000 times out of 1,000 against Jund. Basically, it's Expedition Map with 2 Tron pieces, a Matter Reshaper to go with it, along with this Eldrazi Temple. I've got a Spatial Contortion, which can take down like a quick Tireless Tracker, Scavenging Ooze, maybe even a Tormagoyf if he plays one too early, and I have the Karn. So a pretty amazing hand. And Mines does a very surprising play here.
Start with a turn 1
I have double Mine, by the way.
And usually the card taken here gives a lot of prize. It's something like they're sensitive.
And Mine surprises me here by taking the Expedition map, and I'm like, holy crap, what is the game plan here? Like, I'm not assembling Tron. I have double Mine, a Temple.
His list. That was okay. That might have been the most interesting card to take out of the hand.
Yeah,
in
like
Expedition
even
map.
Sagiclick is talking about it, and
Sean
immediately,
Gifford
obviously,
still
I draw
got
another.
Go on, sorry.
I draw another map, which is always the most tilting thing for a Thoughtseize opponent to face.
And
I'm gonna turn down the volume on this actually a little bit.
just a plan.
So I draw a map. I immediately play the Temple. I think Sagiclick is right, and it was probably a mistake to play the Temple right there because if Mines just goes untap Forest, Assassin's Trophy, or Temple, then all of a sudden I won't be able to play turn 2 Matter Reshaper. Whereas if I just play a Mine, then maybe he's more likely. Then I could protect the Temple from a destruction spell and have a turn 2 Matter Reshaper. I guess I was sort of cocky in thinking that there's no way he's gonna like. I knew he didn't have Ghost Card. I figured he wouldn't take his time to Assassin's Trophy a Temple, and I knew he couldn't Fulminator Mage me yet. And I was pretty keen on wanting to play the Matter Reshaper. Plus, I've been sort of taught from playtesting this deck that a lot of times you do want to play your Temple right away because you can sometimes get punished if you then draw another Temple and hadn't played the first one. But in this case, I don't have a Thought Note or any other play that I could play if I drew another Temple, so maybe just playing the Temple was not necessary. I should just play a different land, but that's the sort of level of decision making that this gets boiled down to when you watch this match over and over and over again. I get further punished actually by playing the Temple because I draw an Urza's Tower. Had I played a Mine, I could then have Tron on turn 3 if nothing went wrong. But I drew a Urza land and just played my Matter Reshaper. And this is pretty good play into the potential of a turn 3 Liliana because if he wants to play Liliana, he has to minus it on my Matter Reshaper, then it draws me a card. So, and I also want to get a creature down as quickly as possible to start pressuring him if he does play like a Ren and 6 or something else like that. And, you know, attacking your opponent is also a good idea.
When you're playing Tron is certainly not.
So Mines has choices here. He has the ability to just play Liliana. He has the ability to play Collector Oof. He has Ghost Quarter. He has basically Ghost Quarter, Fetch Land, Collector Oof, and he goes for the like. So Mines has previously in this tournament played against Toralf Severson, who was playing a big Tron deck, and I think David sort of like tunnel visioned on the sort of plays, the sort of like land destruction plays that are available to him in this deck, and that's why he took my map. He's brought in Collector Oof to deny me further maps and turn off my Walking Ballistas. And he's now about to Ghost Quarter plus Surgical me. And this kind of works out well for him because he knows about the Mine in my hand. He actually gets to take a land from my hand. So pretty good. So I can no longer put Tron together, and he's got a Collector Oof turning off this Expedition map. But, you know, at the end of the day, my cards aren't that expensive. I do have the Spatial Contortion in my hand that I can use to kill the Oof whenever I feel like it. And I still have a land play this turn, so... Along with another... I just ripped another Matter Reshaper, actually. So, best card in the matchup. And the land destruction element that Mines is going after isn't really affecting me that much. Here he decides to go for Fulminator Mage. And so his plan with Fulminator Mage is to, because I'm still attacking with 3/2s, his plan is to block one of my Matter Reshapers with the Fulminator Mage, and before damage, sacrifice Fulminator Mage to kill one of my lands. Which kind of punishes him here because I just draw a land and play Karn. So now, I don't know about any of the contents of my opponent's hand, and my Karn sideboard isn't exactly great right now because I've brought in a whole bunch of cards. So my options for Karn at this point are a Chalice of the Void, which I'm not going to get, a Tormod's Crypt, a Walking Ballista, an Ensnaring Bridge, Mycosynth Lattice, Liquid Metal Coating, Pithing Needle, and Grafdigger's Cage. So I'm not close enough to 6 mana for Lattice, so that's an out. Tormod's Crypt's not going to do anything, that's pointless. Ensnaring Bridge don't really want because I'm on the offense and I'm ahead. I don't want Grafdigger's Cage because that's doing nothing, so my choices are basically Liquid Metal Coating, Pithing Needle, and Walking Ballista against this board. Back here. Back here. And because David actually used a ghost card, he's got fewer lands than I do, and his creatures are smaller than mine, and his colors aren't great. So I decided to go for the liquid metal coating. So the reason I go for liquid metal coating is because next turn I can Spatial Contortion, Collector Roof, play liquid metal coating one of his lands, and plus Karn on one of his lands, turn into a 0/0 creature, killing it. And all of a sudden we go from David Mines being the land destruction deck to me being the land destruction deck. Another thing that I could have done here was just -2 and got Karn. Or I could have +1 on the Expedition map to protect Karn. The other thing that I didn't do here is I did not attack after playing Karn, because all of a sudden I was now... I guess I'm a prison control player at heart, because all of a sudden, once I've resolved the Karn and have a liquid metal coating, my next priority is, okay, I want to keep my Karn alive. And so I want to keep both I want to keep my Karn alive, and I want to keep his loyalty high enough to get another Karn target if I can, to sort of like draw additional cards. So I could have done that by plussing Karn on the Expedition map, maybe attacking with both, and maybe like chumping one of these creatures with Karn. Or, yeah. And maybe that was the right call. I also didn't really want to lose my land until I had another opportunity to use all my lands. And so if I attacked, that's definitely what would have happened. He would have blocked with Fulminator Mage on one of the Matter Reapers and destroyed one of the lands. So that was sort of the reason I didn't attack. My opponent was already down to 10 life, so maybe that was a mistake, but I decided to go for this line. And I look at my sideboard, and I go for the liquid metal coating. And then... oh yeah, my hand, by the way, is my Mystic Forge that I've just drawn. And, or no, it's Spatial Contortion, sorry. Spatial Contortion and now liquid metal coating. And this time, David Mines has the Liliana and plays it, and pluses to make me discard a card. Now, I've just searched out this liquid metal coating. Theoretically, it's precious to me, but without the Collector Roof being dead, which I need to use the Spatial Contortion to kill the Collector Roof, the liquid metal coating does nothing because I can't actually activate the ability of liquid metal coating to turn these lands into artifacts. So, at the end of the day, I just discard the liquid metal coating. So now I draw Mystic Forge. So now I'm like, oh god, I need to keep this Mystic Forge in my hand, either that or play it. I can't let Liliana minus on it, and things need to work from here. So here I had some choices as to what to do, and I think I came up with an inferior line. I'll go through what the best line is. Opponent's at 6 life. What I should do here is -2 Karn, get Pithing Needle, play Pithing Needle for tapping the wastes. David Mines may want to respond to Pithing Needle with Fulminator Mage, because I can name Fulminator Mage with Pithing Needle, or I can name Liliana the Veil. So he may want to respond to that. Doesn't matter either way. Then then what I should do after I cast my Pithing Needle is Spatial Contortion the Collector Oof, and then activate Expedition Map, play a land, and then minus Karn getting some random... Or no, I've already minus Karn for the Pithing Needle. What I do is I name Pithing Needle on Liliana the Veil, so that I can then empty my hand somewhat, and my Mystic Forge, which again I'm planning to basically win the game with. Not to mention the fact that my Matter Reshapers are already kind of winning the game, but then my Mystic Forge is protected from Liliana's plus, so I don't have to worry about discarding it. What I miss is the notion of getting Pithing Needle and naming Liliana the Veil. So the entire rest of this turn is me trying to make it so that I have 2 cards in my hand when Liliana the Veil goes to plus, and I have to discard something because I want to keep Mystic Forge around. I could have just played Mystic Forge. That's another potential angle for this turn.
Forge, that's a sweet one from M20. Oh my goodness, just out of the board there.
But yeah, I tank for a bit, kill the thing, look at my sideboard, then -2 Karn, and it's at this point... So we go back here, actually. It's at this point that the judge realizes our life totals are different. Because I had marked David Mines down for the point when he shocked himself with this Blood Crypt on turn 3. Yeah, he plays it right here, untapped. And you'll see me play the Blood Crypt. We'll even see me mark the life total down immediately. I mark the life total down, and David doesn't. He doesn't touch his life pad for a long time. So During the resolution of this Karn ability, where I -2, the judge notices that I've got David Mines marked at 10, and he doesn't have himself marked at 10. And so I'm partway through resolving Karn when the judge points this out, and then we go through this rigmarole of like, oh, we look at our life paths, and then once play returns to me, I've forgotten that I've activated Karn already, and I like basically don't finish resolving the ability, and then I go to attack. Liliana. I still haven't cracked my map, and it's after I attack, I look down at my hand, and I look at Karn, and I'm like, oh, wait, I haven't. I didn't actually resolve the Karn ability, did I? And I thought I announced it. I was going to get Walking Ballista. And I think this is part of the reason why I didn't see the Pithing Needle line again, because there's this whole discussion about whether I get to resolve the Karn, and I'm trying to, once I finally get the permission to, I resolve it as quickly as possible and get the Ballista. But overall, pretty poorly played turn. And they explain the ruling to Dave, and he's fine with it. Like, he realizes what happens. And it was his mistake in the first place, not marking his own life total, that caused the sequence of events. So he was a good guy, and like, not that he could have really appealed that because the head judge made the decision, but good guy overall. All right. Finally, I make the play where I attack, forcing the Fulminator Mage thing to happen, and I crack it and get a land, and I think I get Blast Zone, and I decide to play the Blast Zone. Leaving the Ballista in my hand to again discard the Liliana's Plus, and the commentators get a good laugh about that. I just draw land, and I finally play my Mystic Forge, and I look at the top card of my library and see that it's Dismember. Then I count up the size of the Tarmogoyf and start figuring out, oh, I can cast this Dismember outside my library because it's a colorless card, and then I can attack his Liliana, and then he'll block with Tarmogoyf, and I'll like kill the Tarmogoyf, and it'll be great. And then I realize, as I'm like about to like here, I like realize, wait a second. No, you can't cast. It's colorless cards. Dismember's a black card, and I slow down, back up, and realize that that's not a legal play. And I just say go, and I plus Karn on nothing because I want Mystic Force to stay alive, and I say go. He reads Karn. He uses his Liliana on minus. See, so much better play to get Pithing Needle, because Liliana not only made me discard a Walking Ballista, it also killed my Matter Reshaper. So Pithing Needle might have been a much better play. Matter Reshaper dies. I reveal Dismember off the top of the library, put it in my hand, and because so his Tarmogoyf is like a 6/7 at this point. I've got a 3/2. He's got one card in his hand. I presume that he's cut out Lightning Bolts, because I haven't seen one yet, and Bolts are pretty bad against Eldrazi Tron. It only kills Matter Reshaper, which is a card he doesn't really want to kill to begin with. I go for the block plus Dismember play here, even though it's something he should know about. And I go for the block and Dismember before damage play. I could go for block, let damage happen, let my Matter Reshaper die, draw the card off the top, which happens to be an Endbringer. But I get a little bit greedy here and go for the 1 for 0, where I get this Dismember the Goyf and block it. And I'm pretty far ahead. I got a Karn. He's got a wimpy little Scavenging Ooze, and by the way, he's at 10 life, so here I just plus Karn on my Mystic Forge and attack, and there's an Endbringer off the top, which I know about, which I've drawn from the previous turn, and that's game. So basically, I think I played pretty well, with the exception of one turn where I didn't get Pithing Needle, and also almost didn't get anything at all with my Karn. But overall, a pretty good matchup for me, partly on the strength of drawing all those Matter Reshapers and having things like Mystic Forge and Wormcoil Engine in my deck. And that was my win in that. So I thought would like automatically put me in a position where I could draw my way into top 8 the next round. As it turns out, because I got randomly paired down for the second time in the tournament. I'd already been randomly paired down against Hawkmuller, the blue-white control player. Not to mention the fact that I lost the very first round of the tournament. So now my tiebreakers are getting worse and worse. But anyway, I got paired down again. There's 3 people on 12 wins and 2 losses. It was a 50-50 shot that I faced another one of those persons and just get to intentionally draw and be, boom, locked for top 8. Unfortunately, I get paired down against Juan Roberto Lopez, so-and-so, what's his name? This guy, who was playing the red Phoenix deck. Let's go back to the other one. Elo project. Let's drink some water, too. So, I get paired against Juan Rodriguez Lopez. I'm in a position where I want to offer a draw because a draw locks me for top 8. He's in a position where he can't accept a draw necessarily because he needs to win this round. He still needs to win a round before he can start drawing in order to top 8. A draw is not terrible for him, but it's also not great for him. I think he already had... I think he had a loss. I don't think he had an initial draw. But basically, he can't really draw, and when after the draw, he doesn't accept it. He wins the die roll. I find out he's on a Red Phoenix. I keep a 6-card hand that has a Chalice of the Void on 1. I play a turn 2 Chalice of the Void on 1, I think on the draw, and then I play a turn 3 Thought Knot, and he doesn't have like the crazy... He has like a one Monastery Swift Spear sort of start, not the crazy, like go mega crazy with Arclight Phoenix kind of start. So my Chalice of the Void on my turn 2, his basically shuts him down completely. My Thought Knot takes away his Arclight Phoenix. Is almost exactly what happened in the top 8, and I win game 1 very easily. While we're shuffling and sideboarding for game 2, I re-offer the draw. So I put him in the position where he's already down a game in a bad matchup where he just got freaking stomped, and he wins. He needs to win both of the next 2, or he could take the intentional draw and get basically a rebuy on trying to win the next round instead. Yeah. And so he thinks about it and he accepts my offer the draw again. And I would rather accept the draw than the risk of me losing the 2 next games, because a draw locks me and a draw locks me and a win locks me, but a loss forces me to need to find another draw. So I just offer the draw again, happy to do it, and I get the draw and I lock for top 8. I just wanted to accept the sure thing of having that lock for top 8 rather than trying to just get the win and getting an even higher seed. Maybe that ends up punishing me in the end, but I was perfectly happy just locking top 8 with that draw. So that's what happens. I get interviewed on camera with Tim Willoughby, which was awesome. Shortly after observing Juan beating Jelger Wiegersma for his top 8, securing himself a spot in top 8. Round 16, I get paired against Manuel Lenz. We both intentionally draw and lock ourselves into top 8. Even more so, we basically lock ourselves into the top 3 seeds of top 8 with the second draw. One of us could have tried to dream crush the other, not removed each other from top 8, but only risking our own potential seeding. So we were just happy to accept the top 8. So that was the end of the Swiss. Super excited. Can't believe it. Everyone's going nuts. Actually, after the conclusion of round 12, I asked Alexander Hayne, the Pro Tour winner of Pro Tour Avacyn Restored, for some help with the tiebreakers math. Got a lot of handshakes and high fives and stuff, but it wasn't even a certain thing until I had received this draw with Juan Rodriguez Lopez. And I was sort of I was sort of sequestered in an area because I thought I was going to get a interview with Tim Willoughby, so I didn't really talk to my buddies, so they didn't know what actually happened this round, and so they all thought I lost or something. So then they tried to talk me when the pairings or the standings went up for the final round. I was running over there, and then I revealed to them, oh yeah, no, I'm locked, baby. So we got paired against Manuel Lenz. We just intentionally drew again, and boom, we're both locked for top 8. So now we move on to the top 8. Manuel Lenz, meanwhile, was playing the Wurza deck, but we just drew. He sort of squinted when after we agreed to a draw, and he asked me what I was playing, and I was playing Eldrazi Tron. He's sort of meh, because Karn the Great Creator is one of the best cards against the Wurza deck, but hey, what are you going to do, you know? So now I'll go back to Twitch, and I've got the top 8. So the way it worked is the first 4 matches, me and Juan were on the back table for the top 8. The front table, they had Martin Mueller. So they would make sure that they got every match of Martin Mueller, every game of Martin Mueller's match, but they would miss a game of my match in the background. That's perfectly fine. Go ahead and support your pro players. I don't mind. But so that means that basically they started both of us at game 1 at the same time, and then from there they switched back and forth to make sure they didn't miss any other games.
The key for the
and
so Phoenix deck has been important.
At this point, these guys we finished our game 1 off camera. These guys have just finished their game on camera, and me and Juan are told to wait for the camera to shift over to watch us. And this is game 2. I won game 1 very quickly by just turn 2 Chalice on 1, turn 3 Thought Knot, take away your Phoenix kind of thing, nonsense, and kill you pretty easily. I think I eventually resolved a Matter Reshaper and just attacked him for 9, attacked him for 9, and he couldn't really do anything because so many of his cards are turned off by Chalice of the Void.
It's the fact that deck.
And actually, I don't even need to go over...
Into a comes in
I don't really need to go over these games too much because they're pretty straightforward.
He liked it.
Mostly, my hand keep here, we could look at that, I suppose.
In she comes.
So I keep a hand of random Tron land, Chalice of the Void, Matter Reshaper, Eldrazi Temples, Thought Knot Seer. I thought it was there's a Thought Knot Seer, a Karn, and a Ghost Quarter. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on the draw. This is not my keep. This is my after I've drawn for the turn. Can we see my keep?
All right, well, an unfortunate mulligan. In she comes.
I guess this is my... I think I drew the Ghost Quarter or something, or maybe just a random land. Because I'm on the draw. And I think he mulled to 6 and basically just go Matter Shaper, or Monastery Swiss Spirit go. But yeah, my hand basically has a Chalice and has Quick Thought Knot. I have a turn 3 Thought Knot, or even, if necessary, a turn 2 Matter Shaper, and I got a Karn, so I just keep it. Slam keep.
On the player, Juan Jose to take over, but really good.
Juan's hand, he's got Lava Dart, Light Up the Stage, a second Light Up the Stage, and a Phoenix?
On the draw, there is a chance for
or is it a land?
Jose to take over.
Lava Dart, land, Light Up the Stage, Phoenix? Yeah, so he doesn't have the Faithless Looting to get that Phoenix into the graveyard, which is my biggest fear.
6 of his cards cost 1 mana of cards.
Card that's played.
Lava Dart
and
as I say, his card
here
closest you get to
is after
he goes for leading off with a Lava Dart on my face so that he can light up the stage me.
Closest you get to him
after,
and he bricks pretty hard on light up the stage. It's 2 lands. I only take 3 damage this turn.
Lands off the light up the stage, of course. Rodriguez Lopez can play 1 hours triggers. Does Gifford have the Chalice?
And
we know that.
I do have the Chalice.
Right,
I play my second Tron land, play Chalice in 1. He has a Lava Dart in his graveyard, which he could have responded to Chalice by casting, but he decided not to do that. Probably a good play. Here, he just gets to play a land and hit me for 1. Here, he makes a mistake and thinks like, oh, he confused his light up the stage in his graveyard with Faithless Looting, a little bit of nerves, I think. I hope he wasn't doing that during this course of the Swiss tournament. But yeah, he confuses the two. Not that it would even matter because Faithless Looting has a CMC of 1 when you flash it back, so we just counter that with Chalice anyway. So he goes to flash this back, realizes it's
coming out of the board,
not that card. I make a quip like, oh, that would be a really good card then if Flight of the Stage had flashback. We back up. I have to correct the life total again, and he just hits me for 1.
And he can start as you.
And I just go. Eldrazi Temple, Thought Knot, his Phoenix, which is one of the few threats that he could have left. He just plays a land. He's going to crack his thing. What do I do here? I think for a while about what I could do. So I have Karn, Matter Reshaper, Walking Ballista. Hey, Stonelight, how's it going? We're just going through my tournament. We've made it up to the quarterfinals now. Walking through the game. But yeah, I have quite a few options here. I've got Blast Zone. I could play and crack it to blow this thing up. I could just play a land and play Karn and Karn Plus on something. I could play Walking Ballista X equals 2. I could play a Matter Reshaper. At the end of the day, I decide to go for put the most power onto play and get the most cards out of my hand to possibly lead into a Ensnaring Bridge, and also just have a lot of blockers in general and be able to maybe threaten Juan's life total. So I went for the play Matter Reshaper plus a Walking Ballista for 1 and so go. End of turn, he cracks his land, just draws another Phoenix, plays it and attacks me down to 11. And there's still the potential, even through a Chalice of the Void, he can cast spells into the Chalice of the Void and get them countered to return the Phoenix. Oh, this one's Phoenix's exile. This one I have in his graveyard. So yeah, I don't know. The only real way I can lose at this point is because all his burn is 1 mana, so Chalice of the Void will counter all of it. The only way I could really lose at this point is getting attacked to death by a Phoenix. I rip a Tron, because that's a mine, so I have Mine, Tower, Power Plant, so I have 7, 8, 9 mana, 10 mana if you go for Eldrazi spells. So I just attack for 4, put him to 10, and then I go for Karn minus get Ensnaring Bridge, cast it, and I only have 2 cards remaining in my hand. He cannot attack with, is it Phoenix anymore? He can't really attack me on the ground because I have Matter Reshaper and Walking Ballista, and from here all I have to do is Mycosynth Lotus lock him out, or just grow Matter Reshaper a few times to deal the final 10. I've locked myself out of attacking with, as long as I have Ensnaring Bridge out, but And once I resolve the bridge, he just concedes.
And I tell you what, Muller well and truly into game.
So, sideboarding against Phoenix, we had a lot of... Because it was my quarterfinals matchup, and I knew that the previous evening, like I knew that at the conclusion of the Swiss, me and my teammates, and also like anyone who would listen, I asked them about sideboarding plans for is it Phoenix? Or sorry, Red Phoenix. And this was what I eventually came up with. Most important card in the matchup, as mentioned before, was Chalice of the Void on 1. Leyline of the Void is a potential play I could make. It basically stops my opponent from 1, getting Arclight Phoenixes out of the battlefield quickly from a Faithless Looting, 2, flashing back Faithless Looting, 3, flashing back Lava Dart, and 4, potentially casting the 1 Finale Promise that he had in his deck. So that's Leyline of the Void, has some utility. But they don't always go for the Phoenixes. They have an even more so than Is It Phoenix, where Is It Phoenix has Phoenixes, Thing in the Ice, or Aria Flame. This deck has even more so. It's got like the Monastery, Swiftspear, Soulscar Mage sort of plan, and the Phoenixes they're not as all in on the Phoenixes. They've only got 4 cards to get Phoenixes into their graveyard. They're not thought scouring them. They're not drawing nearly as many cards. They're not as all in on the Phoenix plan. So I was somewhat convinced by like Hane and the others that maybe we don't go for all 4 Leyline of the Voids. What I was originally planning to do was cut Idbringer, All Is Dust, and the 4 Karns to bring in 4 Leyline of the Voids and some other nonsense. End of the day, sort of walked that back a little bit. Just cut the Endbringers and the All Is Dusts. And we just brought in Ensnaring Bridge, Tormod's Crypt, Basilisk Collar, and Spatial Contortion. Those are the 4 that I brought in. So did not bring in... Yeah, the quarters were really early. I think the semis were also really early in the morning. But thank you so much, people back in Calgary and Alberta who stayed up late or got up really early to watch me. That was so cool. But yeah, that's the sideboard plan I went for. Just these 4. Left the ley lines in the sideboard. The ley line is sort of a sledgehammer when all you need is a mallet when it comes to attacking their graveyard, but they still can punish you at times, and you will see that happen shortly. Leyline is sort of a interesting card in Eldrazi Tron. Because you cannot cast it. You can only have it in your opening hand. Oh yeah, another reason I wasn't as all in on wanting Leyline is because their his postboard plan can really zig when I think he might zag. He's got 2 Shrine of Burning Rage, which is like a 1-card kill you kind of card, and possibly Saheeli. We weren't sure he would bring that in. Also, he has it's mostly just those 2. Basically, alternative threats that don't require him to use the graveyard necessarily, and also allow him to like go wide on me. And so if I dilute my deck so much that I cut all these Karns for instance and bring in all these ley lines, I could reach myself in a situation where sure he doesn't get any Phoenixes out, but now I'd no longer have like my own threats in the terms of what I can find with Karn, the Great Creator. And the other upside of leaving Karn in is that it actually turns off the activation of Shrine of Burning Rage. Actually, thank you, Stone Live, for the sacrifice for trying to advertise my channel during the top 8 broadcast. So yeah, game 2, I keep... What do I have here? A sort of a somewhat mopey hand. I got 1 Tron land, 2 Tron land Expedition map. I've got 2 Matter Reshapers, and I think that's a Eldrazi Temple. So I have 6 cards. I decided to stay on this 6 because I have Tron on turn 3. And Tron on turn 3 can open me up for Karn into Ensnaring Bridge or Karn into all sorts of nonsense. Maybe I can attempt to race my opponent. So I kept this 6 on the strength, basically, of turn 3 Tron. And this spawned a lot of memes because mostly it was turn 3, make 2 3/2s was the thing at the end of the day. He leads off with the Shrine of Burning Rage, which is kind of threatening. I play my Tron land and steer course for turn 3 Tron, but this is Juan's big turn. He goes off crazy here. He leads it off with a Gut Shot to my face, basically to enable Spectacle. I'm going to make this bigger. To enable Spectacle so that he can cast Light Up the Stage, which reveals... this Light Up the Stage is insane, because it reveals Faithless Looting and Blood Moon, Blood Moon, the one Blood Moon that he had main deck, which he now has here, which means that my whole Tron plan is sort of becoming a disaster. And Faithless Looting, as it turns out, just the card he plays, lets him put 2 Phoenixes into his graveyard. It was the most absurd lay of the stage ever, and the 2 Phoenixes come right back out. So if I had Leyline of the Void, at least the Phoenixes wouldn't be a factor. But you can see that the Shrine of Burning Rage certainly would be. So that was a disaster. End of turn, I crack my land regardless to get a Tron land. I do have the risk that I do have cards in my hand and in my deck that I could only cast if I have colorless lands that could produce colorless, which would be these lands normally, except when they're Blood Moon, they can only produce red. And so in order to cast colorless spells when a Blood Moon is out, I need exactly one of my 2 Wastes or one of my 2 Mind Stones or my 1 Warping Whale to make an Eldrazi sign, although Warping Whale itself costs a colorless mana to cast. So, but I figure my best odds, I figure I'm very far behind. I have a lot of issues here. I've got a Shrine of Burning Rage taking up. I've got a Blood Moon threatening to come down if he draws a 3rd land to play it. And I've got these 2 Phoenixes out. There wasn't a guarantee that he had a 3rd land, so I wasn't certain that Blood Moon would get cast. Here I draw a Reality Smasher, I tank for a really long time, and decide to go for the line of... So I could do the thing where I just play 2 crappy Matter Reshapers and, like, maybe try and race his Phoenixes with my Phoenixes, but I don't have to race his Phoenixes, which already have... they have 2-turn head start on me, and I'm at 13 to his 18, and I figure that's not going to happen. So at the end of the day, I decide to go for... play Reality Smasher, attack him for 5, and hold up Spatial Contortion to kill one of the Phoenixes in combat. He does some sort of nonsense, mostly just has the effect of ticking up his Shrine of Burning Rage even further, and then he decides to resolve the Blood Moon, and I have to respond by tapping my 2 mana while I still have Tron to kill one of the Phoenixes. I only get hit for 3, but I'm 10, and he has 10 damage on board, so I need to rip Karn, the Great Creator, to prevent his Shrine of Burning Rage from actually activating, and unfortunately I don't rip it, and I just die. Skip through Faro. So now I'm on the play again where I want to be. And I keep a hand that has, I believe it has Dismember. Let's see, what does it have? I think it's got Blast. Oh, here we got Eldrazi Temple, Tron Land, Blast Zone, 2nd Tron Land, Dismember, and I think Thought Knot. Oh, it's got Thought Knot, or maybe Spatial Contortion and Matter Reshaper. So basically, it has, I think it almost has Tron, if not very close. It has 2 removal spells and has Matter Reshaper. It doesn't have an answer to Great Phoenix play, and doesn't have a Chalice, but I thought this was good enough to keep. I think that must be Spatial Contortion and Dismember that I've got there. And let's just say my draw step is pretty good. I draw Chalice of the Void. So I play my 2nd Tron line, I play Chalice, and boom, we're back to this position. Chalice is like really good, but they do have answers to it post-board in the form of a Braid, but Juan has no chill. He has no patience. He just decides to cast 3 1-mana spells into my Chalice of the Void, countering all of them just to get back his Phoenix to hit me for 3. And like I can handle 1 Phoenix, especially when I get to play a Thought Knot here. Or no, what do I do? Oh, I have the potential. Is it a Thought Knot? It must not be. I have the potential to play a Matter Reshaper. Or... So, yeah, I've got Matter Reshaper, Spatial Contortion, Dismember. And I decide to play it a little slow here by holding up the Matter Reshaper. Sorry, the Spatial Contortion / the Dismember. And I figure also because I've got Chalice, it'll be somewhat difficult for him to retrieve that Phoenix if I kill it. And if he does retrieve it, it'll be at the cost of casting a lot of spells in my Chalice. So I guess I decide that killing the Phoenix there had some value. I finally cast my... Oh, no, here I go for the Karn. Game plan to sort of force him to attack Karn, soaking up more damage, and if he doesn't attack Karn, I can, like, get some more value. Get like the Walking Ballista that's in my sideboard or something like that. He casts his Phoenix, I've light up the stage, attacks it, and I actually rip the last land I need for Tron. All of a sudden I go from just having 4 or potentially 5 mana to going all the way up to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana. So now I can Karn minus for Mycos and Lattice, cast it, then dismember his Phoenix. It was important that I had the dismember because if he can just kill Karn, either through combat damage with creatures or through burn spells, then the Mycos and Lattice doesn't do anything. But Karn plus Mycos and Lattice in combination prevents my opponent from ever tapping his lands for mana from that point on, because all lands and all permanents become artifacts in addition to the other types, and my Karn says activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control can't be activated, so you can't activate the ability of a land, which is normally just a tap for a mana. So that's how the Karn Mycos and Lattice lock works. So I have him locked out, and Eduardo correctly identifies that his out at this point is drawing 2 more gut shots to go with the Lava Dart that's in his graveyard to cast 3 free spells into my Chalice to retrieve 2 Phoenixes back to actually attack Karn and unlock the Lattice lock. But I turn the corner pretty fast at this point because I have a Matter Reshaper out, and Karn can plus onto Mycos and Lattice and turn into a 6/6 because Karn's plus can turn artifacts into creatures with power and toughness equal to their CMC. And so Mycos and Lattice is a 6-mana artifact, and all of a sudden I'm hitting for 9, and Juan's already at 18, so it's a 2-turn clock, and that's it. At the end, he's asking me, like, what would have happened if you didn't draw that tower, and I say, oh, I would have minused Karn to get a Walking Ballista and played a Walking Ballista X equals 2, and just -2'd on the Phoenix to keep Karn alive. And that was the end of the quarters. But yeah, very good matchup for me. Got pretty lucky in drawing that. Got very lucky in drawing that Chalice of the Void in the previous game, or in that previous turn. But overall, very well ahead in the matchup after 2-0ing him pre-board too. So now we go on to the semis. Semis is a much harder matchup. No matter who wins this matchup in front of me, the Hardened Scales or the Hogak matchup, I knew I was going to have a hard time. Both decks very explosive, can do some crazy stuff. A lot of intricate interactions. I knew Martin Mueller was a very good player. Wasn't familiar with Alvaro necessarily, but I knew that I was going to have a hard time no matter what in the semis. And it turns out that was indeed the case. The semifinals, they showed every game of our match. Perhaps unfortunately in some cases for me. This is the game 1 is the trickiest game. I think this is game 1.
Right, Paul, what is this deck?
Alvaro was the higher seed, so he had the choice of going first. And we'll go to where we are. So I've kept a hand of, I think I've got Tronland, Map, Walking Ballista, Dismember. I think I've got a Karn. Excuse me. I think I've got Chalice as well. So I play my first land. Chalice is a big deal against Hardened Scales. Let's pull up his deck list actually. Alvaro Torres? Fernandez Torres? Probably just search for Hardened Scales. I guess that's wrong. The other Hardened Scales player, I guess. There's 3 of them. Okay, fine. I'll look at the top 8 deck list. It's fine. You made me do it. So yeah, Chalice the Void against Hardened Scales is tricky. It is tricky. So here's Alvaro Fernandez Torres' deck. So he's got important CMCs and cards. The most important card in his entire deck is basically Arcbound Ravager. That's 2 CMC. He's got Hangerback Walker, which is an X spell, which is often cast at 2 CMC as well. That along with Walking Ballista. He's also got Metallic Mimic, which is also 2 CMC. And he's also got Throne of Geth, which is 2 CMC. And Evolutionary Leap. So basically, they've got 4 different costs in their deck. They've got 0 for Mox Opal and Welding Jar. That's 8 cards. They got 1 for Ancient Stirrings, Arcbound Worker, Animation Module, and the namesake card Hardened Scales. So that's way more cards. That's 4, 8, 12, 15. 15 1-mana cards. And then 2-mana cards, they've got Mimic plus Ravager that have to be cast at 2, so that's 6. And then a good chunk of their other cards are cast at 2. So like, or 7, I guess, for Evolutionary Leap. So you've got 7. So Stone Life says, what is the whole list of everything you won? Oh, I could go through that very quickly here. So losing the semifinals means, let's see, do I have my name badge here? The name badge has all the prizing, but basically I got 15,000 US dollars with no withholding tax. We happen to be no US withholding tax of 30% because we happen to be in Spain, which is awesome. I got a qualification for the next Pro Tour Mythic Championship in Barcelona, and I got a whole lot of Mythic points. Unless I get a lot more Mythic points, the Mythic points are meaningless, but Mythic points could qualify me for Worlds if I somehow run it back and do another very good Mythic Championship finish. But that's the prizing I got. But yeah, we're looking at Chalice of the Void against Hardened Scales. So the other thing about Chalice of the Void is they have the card Animation Module, which for 3 mana, you can activate Animation Module and choose a counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. It just so happens that Chalice of the Void enters the battlefield with charge counters on it. If I play Chalice of the Void on run, and they've already resolved an animation module, or something else happens, and they get an animation module into play, they can then change the counters on my Chalice of the Void, move it up to 3 or 4 or 5, or even anything they want. Slowly but steadily, but they can change the counters on my Chalice of the Void and possibly make them work against me. The other thing they have a 1-mana artifact that can do that, and they have a 2-mana artifact that can do that, because Throne of Geth, they can sacrifice an artifact to proliferate, again, having the ability to add counters to things of their choosing. So, Chalice of the Void against Hardened Scales is very tricky because their mana costs are disparate, and they've got ability to change the number of counters on my card. Chalice of the Void on 1 would prevent Ancient Stirrings, mostly for Ancient Stirrings or maybe subsequent Hardened Scales from going off. A lot of time they're going to be playing their Hardened Scales on turn 1 or playing a lot of their Arcbound Workers early on. Chalice of the Void on 0 prevents them from having a very explosive start with Mox Opal into sometimes they can go like turn 1, Mox Opal, play 2-mana Metallic Mimic, and then play their entire rest of their hand of Hangerback Walkers and Walking Ballistas for X equals 0. That's a very explosive start that Chalice on 0 could stop. But yeah, sometimes they could even have a start where they also slip in a Hardened Scales at some point. So my Chalices are both not infallible because the counters on them can change, and there's a few potential converted mana costs I can put a Chalice on for. And we'll see me get punished twice for my choice I make of my Chalice of the Void. So he just goes Pendelhaven, which is a very annoying card for me in this game. Pendelhaven into Arcbound Worker. I have a Dismember in my hand. I'm not going to Dismember a 1-mana 1/1, probably.
Yeah, really nice looking hand here for Sean Gifford. You have a look at it there on the screen.
And then he just goes jams Worker. And now I stop him because Arcbound Worker has the mechanic of modular, where if you kill an Arcbound Worker, you can then move its counters onto a different artifact creature they have in play. And because my interaction in this game is this Dismember, and right now I'll be facing down 3 Arcbound Workers and taking 3 damage a turn unless I do something else. And I have I think I have a card in my hand that I do want to eventually protect against an offense. I decide at this point to Dismember the Arcbound Worker that was in play to begin with before he resolves these other ones. What he could do in response to his own modular trigger after I kill the first one is he could activate Inkmoth Nexus and put one of the counters on that, but instead he just lets it disappear. So he immediately plays his card without giving me an opportunity to respond. So I have to I let him back. I make him back up. You're allowed to do that in Paper Magic. And he casts that one. He puts that one on the stack, and I decide to dismember the one that was currently in play. And he proceeds with playing the 2 workers regardless. So my turn. I've drawn another Tron land. I've also got a map, and I've got a Chalice. If I play Chalice on 1 here, I won't be able to resolve the map, and I won't be able to then get Tron. So I decide to play the map rather than Chalice on 1. Also, he's kind of emptied his hand with 1 drop, so I figured Chalice on 1 isn't that very useful. So I just keep the Chalice in my hand and play the map. And immediately he plays a 1 drop in Ancient Stirrings and searches up an Arcbound Ravager, which is terrible for me. So that's awful. So now I crack my map, play Tron. Oh yeah, and here I have to start doing math because Arcbound Ravager plus all these artifacts with modular triggers can almost turn this Inkmoth Nexus into lethal right now. So he could activate Inkmoth Nexus, use Pendlehaven targeting Inkmoth Nexus, turn so it's 1/1, give additional power, it's a 2/2, sacrifice a worker, modular onto Arcbound Ravager, sacrifice a worker, modular on Arcbound Worker, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then he could sacrifice Ravager, put the counters onto Inkmoth, and all of a sudden he's got, so that's 5, 6, 7 power. He's already got like a 7 power Inkmoth Nexus, which only needs to deal 10 damage of infect counters to kill me, so I'm already like terrified. So what I decided to do here is sort of hedge a little bit, still assemble Tron, and play a Walking Ballista X equals 1, so that if he draws like a hanger, like another Arcbound Ravager or something, but also doesn't have an additional land, I can at least protect myself from maybe from the Inkmoth Nexus skill. But honestly, it probably wasn't even any good because he can use, what he can do is activate Nexus, sacrifice one of the Arcbound Workers targeting the excuse me, the modular targeting the Nexus, and then if I go to Walking Ballista to the Nexus, he can just sacrifice the other one. So, but the fact of the matter is, I have no other plays I can even make. I've already used my Dismember. I could have mapped for a Ghost Quarter and played that, but like that's I think a losing line because I'm just sort of treading water at that point. And if he had lethal in play, I would have gotten Ghost Quarter to at least prevent it, but he doesn't have lethal in play right now. He needs to play like 2 more artifacts to actually threaten lethal with the thing. So I just play a Walking Ballista, and he decides whether he needs to respond to that and decides he doesn't have to. He actually does draw a Hangerback Walker. Let's see. Could he have just killed me? Let's see. He plays Hangerback Walker for X equals 1. No, he plays Hangerback Walker for X equals 1, activates Inkmoth Nexus, sacrifices a Arcbound Worker, targets modular onto the Inkmoth Nexus. I attempt to kill it. He sacrifices the other one, lets the modular go onto it. That's 1, 2, 3. And then there's 3 counters here. 4, 5, 6, 7. No, it's only 7 power, so it's not lethal with the Hangerback. So he evaluates that, decides it's not lethal, and just attacks for 3. Now, and then he plays the Hangerback for X equals 2. Next turn, Hangerback is lethal, unless I play my Karn. So now for the hardest turn of the game for me, and the entire match, basically. I play Karn, and first, Karn turns off all the activated abilities, and because he has this Arcbound Ravager, there's a whole lot of stuff that he might decide to do here. So obviously, unlike my opponent who rushes through things, I respect the fact that he's going to do a lot of stuff, and I just put Karn into play with no loyalty counters on him yet because I'm waiting for it to resolve. And so he decides to put a bunch of counters onto Hangerback Walker and then sacrifice it, which is the right play, and is very brutal for my Karn. Now I have a decision to make with Karn. And this is still a pre-boarded game, game 1, so my wish board is still the same as it would be from the default. So let's look at my options here. And like, it's possible that, and it's probable that I made a mistake here, but let's see if we can figure out what the best line is. Is there any way to make, let's put these all to the right, I guess. There we go. So, here's the lay of the land. Karn's got 5 loyalty. I'm at 10 life. He's got a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's got 10 power, basically, to just kill me if I don't interact with his board state, generally speaking. Pendlehaven can be activated on one of the 1 power things to give it 2 power, basically making my Walking Ballista for 1 pretty awful. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 mana remaining for non-Eldrazi things and 5 mana remaining for Eldrazi things. Karn is hard to keep alive here because Karn, the most loyalty I could put Karn up to is 6. So I could plus Karn to 6. He activates an Inkmoth Nexus, attacks Karn with all the creatures, 4 Thopters and an Inkmoth, and the Ravager. I block Ravager, put a counter on my Walking Ballista, remove 2 counters to target 2 different Thopters, because the first one he'll pump with a Pendelhaven. I guess I just would target the same one twice. Would that be better? Let's assume I target the same one twice. Karn takes 1, 2, 3, 4 damage. He was at 6, and he's now down to 2. I don't have a Walking Ballista. My hand is Chalice of the Void, Reality Smasher, Scavenger Grounds, and nonsense. So at the end of that sequence, he still has 3 Thopters, potentially he still has Ravager, 3 Thopters, and Nexus. I don't have a Karn, I don't have a Walking Ballista, and that's that. So that's to keep Karn at 2. No matter what, I'm losing my Walking Ballista if I don't play another creature this turn, because I have to block Ravager to keep Karn alive. Another thing I could do here is Karn minus play the Bridge, and but I still have 4 cards in my hand, so the Thopter's attacking no matter what, so Karn is dying no matter what. So then the other thing that the people in the chat and some of the commentators mentioned was potentially getting Pithing Needle to possibly name Ravager. So I can -2 for Karn to get Pithing Needle. I still have to minus Karn for that. I still have to protect my own life, because again I'm at 10, and unless I do some blockers, I will just die to his attackers. And there's the whole notion of, hey, there's 4 Thopters plus a Infect guy out that my only means of killing is by, so I have 8 mana, is by adding 2 counters to a Walking Ballista, and then like removing 2 counters from a Walking Ballista, taking it my whole turn. And if he has Pendelhaven available to him during those times, then I need to remove 2 counters just to kill 1 Thopter. So my theory was, well, I want to try and keep this Walking Ballista alive so that I can actually, in the long term, deal with these Thopters that will eventually kill me, probably. And B, I need to protect my own life total this turn by playing a creature. And C, I'm not going to be able to... I'm only going to have one opportunity to search up something with Karn, so I better make it good. So because my hand is currently, I think, land, Chalice, I think 2 Chalice. Land, Chalice, I think Reality Smasher, maybe a second Chalice. I think Karning for Bridge is my best bet, because I can play Bridge and potentially get down to 0 cards in hand, so none of his Thopters can attack anymore. And put myself in a position where I can then stabilize the board behind an Ensnaring Bridge and eventually draw enough things to kill my opponent, or reassemble a Karn lock or get an additional Karn. That was sort of my justification in my line. No matter what, if I minus, Karn will die. So I could have minused for a Pithing Needle. Karn minus for Pithing Needle. He attacks Karn, kills it. Next turn I play Pithing Needle. I name Smasher.
Stony silence effect.
So I play Pithing Needle. He then presumably grows Ravager even further, because my Karn is now dead. He makes it like an 8/8, and now I'm in chump block. Now I'm in the abyss. I have to continually chump block this gigantic Ravager, even with my... Yeah, I think I like my line. I think I like the Bridge line, honestly.
Is the most important card in play by far, so we might see a +1.
Because Bridge deals with the attacking from the Ravager, which again is a big threat here. I'm at 10 life, I only have a single 1/1 thing. I have to think for forever here. You see some people mentioning Bridge. And like, this is very tricky spot. And I'm like doing the math, and like, again, I'm possibly under the gun, and I identified there's no way to both minus Karn and keep it alive, and there's no way if I plus Karn to keep my Walking Ballista alive, and I figure my Walking Ballista is one of my better cards when I have Tron out here. Let's see. If I plus Karn, block, pump, shoot two different or shoot the Thopter that gets Pendelhavened. Karn takes 1. I blocked the one that takes. Karn takes 4, goes down to 2. I could plus Karn again, but I don't have a walking ballista.
He needs to keep his collar. Stick to there. Problem gonna happen, but here, friction beforehand. So
Or I could minus Karn, get a Pithing Needle, Needle
once again at the top of the
Ravager, but in the interim, I have to minus Karn for Needle, so Karn is dead. So after Karn dying and before Needle resolving, he can sacrifice the remaining Thopters to make Ravager gigantic.
modern format. About that.
Yeah, and because I have double Chalice at this point, I just cast 1 Chalice for 0 to potentially prevent him casting a Welding Jar or a Mox Opal and doing some shenanigans with that. Chalice on, at this point, Chalice on 1 is somewhat useful, and I really wanted to play the Reality Smasher to have a 4/4 or 5/5 blocker for his 4/4 Ravager. So like he attacks Karn with only 3 Thopters. I could sacrifice the counter on Walking Ballista to try to hit Thopter because he has the Pendelhaven to make it 2 toughness no matter what or maybe even 3 toughness. Pendelhaven gives a 1 toughness creature plus 1/2. Yeah, make it into a 2/3. So there's no point for me to even move the Ballista. So I take a point from this. Karn dies, nothing I can really do about it. But I have my my bridge. But then he gets to go. Immediately. I think he draws off the top. Yeah. Oh wait, what happened here? Did he already have it in hand? I'm curious if he drew the. What was his hand at this point? Oh, he was empty-handed too.
It's essentially a way to start emptying the.
Yeah, he ripped Stirrings off the top, which he plays, gets Walking Ballista, and just kills me right now. With thanks to friggin' Pendelhaven, I have no ability to interact with. And there was no way I was gonna be able to cast the Pithing Needle the same turn. Let's see, I could have cast it, but then I wouldn't have even been able to put a counter on my Walking Ballista. So it would just be like play a Pithing Needle, and then chump Ravager. I like the bridge line. I don't know. I'm still standing by the line I went with. Very tricky turn. There was no way to keep. There was a way to keep Karn alive, but at the expense of my Ballista, no way to keep Karn alive a second turn. Yeah, and I just got destroyed. And everyone was sort of tunnel visioning on the Inkmoth Nexus, but at the end of the day, it was a Walking Ballista to kill me.
That said, I wonder in that game because a plus would have made it very hard to take down.
See, Tragic Like thinks a plus would have kept my Karn alive, but not really, because my Walking Ballista would have died. He still would have had 4 Thopters afterward. I think going for a bridge, trying to get to 0 cards in hand so he could never attack, and just have to then deal with Walking Ballista was the right play. Pendelhaven really screwed up everything by making it so that every single counter of my Walking Ballista is nullified. The first counter of every activation of my Walking Ballista is nullified.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, these guys are going to pass each other.
So this is game 3. Opponent has mold once, I think. He's got double Arcbound Worker, land, Stirrings.
So yeah, looking at this hand, 2 Tron pieces, Mind Stone, Chalice.
I've got Warping Whale, Chalice, 2 lands, Mind Stone, Thought Knot. It's a pretty blasé hand, but I keep it anyway. So I go for the Chalice. So this is what, game 2? Yeah, this is game 2. That was game 1. This is game 2. So I went for the Chalice on 0. I got the tip off from my colleague who tested this matchup much more than I that Chalice on 0 had value. It turns off an explosive Eldrazi Mimic start. It turns off an explosive Mox Opal start. It turns off an explosive. Well, it turns off basically them casting the Welding Jar. Plus, I'm on turn 2. I'm more than likely going to be casting my Mind Stone. And as it turns out, he draws. instead of having the Hardened Scales in his opening hand, he draws it on turn 2 and gets to play it and then like spit out a whole bunch of 1 CMC cards, and my Chalice on 0 effectively does nothing. At the end of the day, I don't draw an additional land anyway, so I wasn't really winning this game. But it turns out his hand was just chock-a-block full of 1 CMC things. Yeah, I don't draw lands. I reach a point where, again, because of Hardened Scales and Arcbound Ravager, I just draw a bunch of expensive cards, and I reach a point where, again, I'm almost at check, where if I don't draw something, I just die. So I decide to crack my Mind Stone, even though it's putting me down a land, and I get a Dismember and and kill his thing. But now I'm just dead. There's no, with Arcbound Ravager, Walking Ballista, Pendelhaven, and just my 1 Walking Ballista, I'm essentially naked and I can't do anything. So he destroys me in game 2. Game 3, I'm on the play. I get to sideboard finally. Excuse me. Let's look at my deck. How did I sideboard? See if I can remember. So sideboarding against them, I brought in the 4 ley lines. What's going on here? All right. So I cut out the All's Dusts because they literally do almost nothing. I obviously didn't cut any cards. I cut out all the Reality Smashers because they don't come down early enough to protect a Karn from the ground offense, and you can't really race Hardened Scales. They have such an incredible, ridiculous clock. I basically have to play the control role, so I cut the Smashers for that reason. I bring in the 4 ley lines. I bring in the Basilisk Collar. I bring in the Spatial Contortion. I think that's it. Crypts don't need that. Liquid Metal Coating only useful when you have a Karn, so you never bring that in. Was Pithing Needle something I brought in? Left in the Warping Whale, Dismembers. Left all the Karns in, obviously. I wrote it down here, actually. I should just look at what I did in the end. That was the wrong sideboard match. Yeah. Just cut the 4 the 2 All's Dust, the 4 Smashers. Brought in 4 ley lines. Contortion and Collar. And I think I left a Needle on the side. We'll find out possibly. I don't think I resolve a Karn in this game. Or actually, no, I do resolve a Karn. But basically, at this point, my wish board is somewhat gutted. Excuse me. I've got Needle, Worm Coil, Ballista that I could really get, or Bridge, with Mystic Forge, Lattice, and so on. So let's see how this goes. Oh yeah, his sideboard is basically Damping Spheres, possibly Nature's Claims, and definitely Dismembers. It's the Damping Sphere is a maybe. So like, Nature's Claims a maybe, Damping Sphere is a maybe, Dismember is an auto lock. We're not 100% sure what he cuts. We think he might cut some Tormod's Crypts, but we're not sure. He probably cuts. He might cut what's it called? The can we see his main deck? The what the hell are you called? Welding. Yeah, he might cut the Welding Jars because a lot of my removals is Exile or Dismember or -X. But yeah. Let's see. I keep Tron, Eldrazi Temple, Dismembered, and Endbringer, hoping that I can disrupt something early on with Dismember, resolve an Endbringer, and carry the game from there. Endbringer allows me to ping 1 mana or 1 toughness things, allows me to draw additional cards, so I keep on the strength of that. No Chalice, no Karn, but lots of mana and the ability with Dismember to interact.
They've always got it. They've always got it, Eduardo. And this stuff getting basis in this turret.
So he leads off with the animation module on 1, and then he has a Hardened Scales. So that's pretty good. And the name of the game here is to try to not get wrecked.
Yeah, it's looking poor.
offer the fit here who
So
5-5,
on the turn that I would play Tron, my original plan was to play Endbringer. I draw a Thought Knot. So I was going to have 7 mana. I was probably going to
originally the plan was to end
play Endbringer and dismember this Arcbound Worker, or potentially not. I figured my removal was precious to me, and I kept dying to Arcbound Ravagers and stuff, so I was going to be a little more patient with my dismember. Also, there's the potential that he uses 3 mana. He uses his turn to 3 mana target Arcbound Worker to put a counter on it or something. I thought I might be able to time walk that, so I don't rip off the dismember right away. And then when I draw the Thought Knot, I decide to play the Thought Knot here to potentially protect my Endbringer from dismember, because I want to be able to take over the game with Endbringer, and he has not had an opportunity to use a dismember yet, so I decide to go for that. And his hand is Nature's Claim, which I now know about, and it becomes a factor for the entire rest of the game. This Ancient Stirrings, he's got, and then 2 lands. I just take the Ancient Stirrings, leave him with 2 lands, and I figure I'm in pretty good shape. I forget that when you play your Graph land, it enters a counter on it, and that actually triggers Animation Module, which means he can make a little servo here if he wants. And in response to the servo, this is my opportunity finally, I guess, to dismember the Arcbound Worker, because I know his hand. And I don't want those modular triggers to go onto a servo, so I use that opportunity to kill that, and he gets a servo. He can decide to graft onto it to make it a 3/3 and trigger the other animation module, but he decides not to do that. I guess he's patient and wants to wait for a better graft target. Here I just play my Endbringer and swing for 4 and play a map. My plan with the map is to get Blast Zone so I could pop off his Hardened Scales and his animation module. He goes Ancient Stirrings into a Arcbound Ravager, again being a huge pain in the butt for me, and then plays it here as a 3/3 and triggers a thing. So now he's starting to go off. I crack for my Blast Zone, and I get it, and I play it and use it right away so that I know what he's done with these servos and what he's done with Arcbound Ravager, because if you are going to use Arcbound Ravager, you would definitely want to do it before the Hardened Scales dies. So yeah, I want complete information before I use any of the abilities of my Endbringer, and he makes a friggin' 8/8 Arcbound Ravager. And so now I'm in a position where, okay, this thing is huge. I'm already at 16, I guess, because I used Dismember, and so this is a 2 tax to kill me, plus it's larger than all my creatures. I have the option here to, like, prevent it from blocking this turn and attacking for 4 with Thought Knot, untapping my Endbringer on my opponent's turn, prevent it from attacking again, etc., but I decide, I think rightfully, to draw cards instead, and pass with... Oh no, and then I draw Karn, actually. So I have 5 mana here, and I make a bit of a decision to play Karn right now, which forces my Thought Knot to chump. If I don't play Karn right now, what else could I do? Like, I didn't have to play Karn right there, but like he's already got he's already got a Heartbound Ravager at 8 counters. If he just plays like a Walking Blist off the top, he fires off a Walking Blist as a 2/2, puts 8 counters on it, it's a 10/10. He uses 5 to kill Endbringer and 4 to kill Thought Knot. I think it was right for me to play Karn. Unfortunately, it does mean that I have to either chump with Endbringer or chump with Thought Knot, and I was okay chumping with Thought Knot here. So that's what I did. He gets to draw an additional card, which is not great for me, but luckily, unlike in the previous game, he doesn't have the ability to make a whole bunch of Thopters and to threaten Karn with that. Plus, I have this Endbringer, which can now prevent the thing from attacking. So my hand is now Mindstone, Warping Whale, Tron Land, Eldrazi Land. I know about the Nature's Claim in his hand, so I'm somewhat reticent to bother getting any artifacts, but what I could have maybe done is get Mystic Forge here to force him to use his Nature's Claim, but I decided to be relatively patient with things and just keep plussing Karn and creating more backups. Basically, I figure, well, with Endbringer online, I'm drawing 2 additional cards per turn, and his Ravager can no longer attack. Plus, none of his activated abilities can be activated. I can't really attack Karn very well. Actually, it's funny, he was tapping his Ravager, but doesn't technically tap it, it just prevents him from attacking or blocking. And yeah, instead of using Karn minus on Mystic Forge, or Walking Ballista, which are my two potential targets in the sideboard, I just plus Karn on this expedition map.
Kind of puts you in a spot where you just
And I hold up, not the activation of the expedition map, because now I've turned it into a creature and it has summoning sickness, so I can't actually activate it. But I still have, Warping Whale if I need to create a servo to chump the giant Arcbound Ravager, and I have obviously the Endbringer. Now he rips a Dismember, so I get to prevent the attack from Arcbound Ravager this turn, and then he dismembers the Endbringer. Now I need a new plan to deal with this. So, but then I just draw another Endbringer. So now my plan is play this Eldrazi Temple, replay another Endbringer, I guess I crack map for a Blast Zone to put myself in the position where I can kill his Arcbound Ravager the next turn, and I plus Karn on the Mind Stone so that I again have two blockers, or I have a blocker that I can chump the Ravager with. In fact, two blockers because I have Ravager plus the Eldrazi Scion token from Warping Whale. And I draw the card in response to the Warping Whale. So like, oh, see you, Stone Life. Thanks for stopping by. So, I think the only other line I could have potentially taken was the turn that I turned Expedition Map into a creature. I could have just minused Karn for... Excuse me. I could have just minused Karn for Mystic Forge and played it and just let him zap it with Nature's Claim, and then been able to resolve something like a Mycosynth Lattice or something from that point. I was taking things a little slow, clearly, but Mystic Forge would have taken up a lot of my mana and prevented me from cracking my map for the Blast Zone, etc., etc. All right, now I'm on the draw again. Not where I want to be. I think I mulled that hand. So the hand is... hand is land, land. This is a 7-card hand. Land, land, chalice, chalice, needle, ballista.
I think it's a decent hand.
Like, it's possible it's a keeper. Chalice, as Eduardo and them are saying, chalice on the draw is so much worse than on the play. I kind of am already treating this as a mold of 5. And there's no guarantee that I can even cast Karn. And if I can cast Karn, it's possible it's already too late by that point. I decide, because the two chalices are pretty bad on the draw, to just mulligan.
I saw some of number
So this time I have a pretty good hand. I've got 2 lands, Matter Reshaper, Leyline of the Void, turns off all his modular triggers and all his Thopters. I've got a Blastless Color plus Walking Ballista. This hand is great. And I just bought him the Matter Reshaper because it's the least essential card in my hand. And I lead with the Leyline, and I play my Ballista, or my Color. And now, everyone was making fun of me of Chalice for 0 in Game 2, and now I get punished for not chalicing for 0. Because now he has a Metallic Mimic, which he plays, and then gets to spit out 2 0-mana Hangerback Walkers and get a whole giant board state already.
What a huge play here.
Oh, that was really... Yeah, that's one of the sweetest plays. Void. I think Alvaro would have easily...
Now I play the Chalice on 1. It does mean that my Leyline of the Void is protected against Nature's Claim, and he can never remove it unless he gets a Throne of Geth down. And then just so happens that Fernandez draws possibly the best card he could possibly have in this situation, which is the... what's this thing called? Sylvan Awakening? What's that stupid card called? Evolutionary Leap, sorry. Evolutionary Leap. So my A plan of getting this Basilisk Collar on this Walking Ballista is now all of a sudden neutered by the fact that every creature of my opponents that I kill, he's just going to pay a green mana to sacrifice to get a different creature off the top of his library instead. So, just kind of get wrecked. I decide to slow roll my Ballista till I have 4 mana where I can play it, and as next to... I decide now to dismember the Walking Ballista before it gets any larger, and if I'm going to use my dismember, I want to use it at an opportunity where he doesn't have a green mana to activate the thing. Meanwhile, I'm taking 2 damage a turn. I've just taken 4 from that. I'm taking 2 damage a turn from this construct. Unfortunately for me, Alvaro has dismember.
it doesn't do so, Alvaro kind of has to find
And
his-
I'm
there's also a
patient,
spot where
so here I take an
Alvaro
additional 2
doesn't
damage,
do so, just
not
attacking
shooting the
for 2
construct.
and firing off this member if
Because what I want to do is equip
which is gonna look
the
quite
collar
good.
first before I use any counters on this wonky ballista, because every time I deal 1 damage, I want to gain the life back. But maybe it was right to just kill that instead.
Basilisk, and that card can, and not a tower, not a power plant.
But yeah, he figures he might as well just attack with construct because it's like its life is short due to ballista anyway.
There's also
It's possible I should have saved 2 life there just by shooting construct.
Sean can disrupt, just attack.
The other reason to not shoot construct is if I don't, I can react.
If Sean decides to equip the
I can react to him activating Hangerback Walker with it.
that is mine. Don't believe
And
it.
the other reason I didn't want to shoot there is because I wanted to equip Collar and use 1 counter on Hangerback Walker to get it out of the way because it's the larger of the 2 threats and it could continually grow.
You said it.
Fortunately, he has the Dismember here in response to my activation. I kill the 1 run in response, not before he makes his other thing into a 3/3 before I know about Dismember.
So now,
And now I'm pretty far behind. I basically draw Thought Knot, which doesn't do a whole lot. Takes away a 1 mana spell he couldn't cast already. His Sylvan, his Evolutionary Leap is basically putting me in the dirt because I can't at any point attack and gain life because any creature, he can just block my Thought Knot with the creature and then sacrifice it to Evolutionary Leap to get another creature. And anytime he eventually decides to attack, the same thing might occur, and I'll lose my Thought Knot and he'll draw a card. And unfortunately, I go on to draw another Leyline of the Void and two Expedition maps, which I can't cast, and eventually I find a Blast Zone off of a thing. I pop his 2s, get rid of his sacrifice outlets for a turn, and finally have an opportunity to attack him and gain some life. I'm at 6, he's at 16. I can attack and gain 4 life up to 10. I can attack him. So this is the decision as to whether I attack or not. If I don't attack, if I attack, I don't gain 4 life. I stay at 6. If he top decks a Dismember, I just die. But that's probably going to happen no matter what. If I don't attack, I don't take the 7 damage hit from this thing.
own ability. Yeah, much prefer this.
Like, I can almost race a 7-power creature with a 4-power creature with lifelink. I attack up to 10. He hits me down to 3. I attack up to 7. He kills me? No, I guess that doesn't work. Attacking there was probably just not great. Did I know about the Ravager at that point? I did. Yeah, that attack was maybe not great. I would have been at 6 instead of 4. Instead of 3, rather. And then this line means I wouldn't have died on the spot to this Walking Ballista. But I was still far behind and needed to keep drawing spells. So that was the conclusion of the tournament for me. A pretty bad matchup where I will be honest, I didn't practice that matchup enough. It's possible if I had more time. Like, we finished the tournament at like 9 o'clock the previous evening. And then I have to be back at the tournament site at 8:15 the next day in order to be ready for the top 8. So there's no real time. There was enough time to consider my quarterfinals matchup, and I did do that quite a bit and thought about a sideboard plan. And but there wasn't a whole lot of time to dedicate to either of Hogak or Hardened Scales, the winner of the other quarterfinals that I would be facing in the semis. So it's not like I could get any more real practice in against Hardened Scales. I have played the deck before and I was aware of quite a bit of the interactions and was comfortable-ish doing Ravager and Hardened Scales math, but clearly some things just didn't go my way, and like in terms of decisions on Leyline or on Chalices, but I do stand behind getting that Ensnaring Bridge in game 1. There's no real way to keep Karn alive for more than a single turn. And there was no way to keep Karn alive for a single turn. I was only going to get 1 activation out of the Karn minus, and I figured I had to do it when I did it to get that bridge. Anyway, that was the story of the tournament. Ended up 3rd place in the Mythic Championship. I got I think we can see the prizing here. schedule, prizes, prize structure. Yeah. So I was third place. I got $15,000. I got 24 pro points, which no longer have a purpose except for the team series, which I'm not a part of. I got, what is this all about? Oh yeah, so that's pro points based on ranks. So I got 24 of those, and then there's mythic points, but those don't do a whole lot. And then I qualify for Richmond. So that was my total prize pool. Pretty sweet. True draft's worth of cards, $15,000. And that was basically the story of my tournament. Lot of complexity to the final match against Hardened Scales, Leyline of the Void mattering, Chalice of the Void being weird, Ravager obviously being insane, and I think I overall played reasonably. I think the worst play I made was against David Mines in the previous feature match area, and not getting Pithing Needle with my Karn minus, and also almost missing a Karn activation, but aside from that, pretty happy with how I played overall in the tournament, and I guess I had to be because I went 12-2 or 13-3 in overall. Gonna make this somewhat of a short stream because I am still sick, but I did want to get out, and I get a little bit of a tournament report going there and talk about how I chose my deck and what I did in the draft, and sort of get on stream again and say hi to people basically. But I think I'm actually gonna call it here. Normally, I'd be streaming for around this time, plus an additional like 3 or so hours, but like I said, I'm still pretty sick and still a little jet lag from coming from home from Barcelona. Thank you so much, everyone who watched me, who cheered me on, and who watched me playing in the top 8 coverage. I hope I didn't play too slow for you. One thing I noticed, which it's funny, when you don't ever get feature matches, you don't notice these things about yourself because you don't really see yourself playing Magic. Like, let's go back to it.
Memory, Eduardo, as to what they're playing.
I have to find the David Mines one, I guess.
On the deal with for Juan, he's decided, look, I can.
Is this the David Mines? No,
right
that's
now at 2-3, but
that's that one.
First, some other.
And the one moment of
Oh, it's back here.
yeah. Definitely big.
Shaper can.
Yeah, one thing I noticed about watching myself play is I always put my library on the left side of the table, because that's how it's depicted in every digital Magic game. That's how it was depicted in Duels of Planeswalkers when I first started playing Magic. That's how I always put it on the left side of the table when I first started playing. It's where it's positioned on Magic Online and where it's positioned on Magic Arena. Never really saw any reason to ever move it before, until I watched myself on coverage and realized that I'm always drawing cards with my right hand. So I'm reaching across my own body and across the table in the board state to draw cards all the time. And I'm like holding my hand in my left hand and drawing cards with my right hand. And so that's like just additional like extra energy, extra movements, the potential to like brush my board state and all this stuff. All I really need to do is just put my library on the right side of the battlefield, along with my graveyard and my exile zone as well. But at this point, I'm so like locked in on putting my library on the left side that I don't know if I could even change. I've been doing it this way for 7 years. Little weird like optimizations that you notice about yourself when you get to see yourself on camera. I also noticed that my hair was terrible the entire top 8, but there's not much I can do about that at this point. But yeah. Other things I noticed, I just generally played a little slow, made a handful of mistakes, almost missed a Karn activation. But overall, relatively pleased with my how I played. People were critiquing my shuffling a lot on the chat. I'm more used to shuffling with a playmat, where I shuffle slightly differently, and it's a little easier to do riffles and stuff. The feature match area doesn't have playmats; it just has the solid surface. Not that it really changes how I shuffle that much. Basically, I riffle and then bridge the cards together upside down, and maybe it takes a little more actions than it should, but I'm relatively happy with how I shuffle. I could shuffle relatively quickly. But yeah, that's the story of my tournament, and very exciting. Not only I was already excited for this time to be on feature match at the Pro Tour for the first time ever. Then I was excited to win my PTQ finals to qualify for Richmond. Then I was excited to top 8, and then I was excited to win my quarterfinals and potentially be playing for the finals. Had I won against Alvaro by some sequence of miracles, I would have then faced Thorolf on regular Tron in the finals, which would have been an even more difficult matchup. So it's more than likely that I would have stopped at $20,000 total prize pool and a few more mythic points, but that's about as far as I would have gone. And very unlikely I could have stolen 3 games against Thorolf. There is the factor that I would have been on the play. My game plan would have been mulligan hard for like turn 3 Tron Karn plus plus liquid metal coating in the 3 games that I was on the play to try and assemble a mana destruction like engine of liquid metal coating one of your lands, Karn Plus on it to destroy it, to basically keep him locked at however many lands he had to begin with. That would have been basically my only game plan, and because I would have been on the play potentially in 3 games, it's possible it would have worked, but we'll never know because Varro just kicked my butt with those very timely walking ballistas, and my Chalice is not matching up well against his curve. I did the Chalice for 1 when 0 would have been better, and Chalice for 0 when 1 would have been better, but you can't know what you're going into when you play these cards, so that's life. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by for this admittedly brief stream where I just went over my tournament and how things went, and I'll just leave you with this bad boy of my final ranking. Now I'm 23-23-2 at the PT. I credit most of that to a couple factors. Well, I credit my original lack of success at the Pro Tour to definitely not practicing enough, not drafting nearly enough, and not playing nearly enough with the new sets. All the previous Pro Tours occurred where you had basically a 2-week window, maybe 2-week window with the new set to then prepare. And so if you're in a small team, or maybe you don't even have a team, it's fairly difficult to actually prepare, or was fairly difficult to prepare alone for the Mythic Championship, or Pro Tours as they were called in the past, because the set wouldn't be on Magic Online for drafting for a while, so you had to assemble like paper people to draft with, and you had to sort of build out a metagame with the new standard set before seeing a whole lot of tournament results. The change to making these Mythic Championships happen much later in the sequence of set releases made it a lot easier for me to succeed at this Mythic Championship, because I had the opportunity to draft Modern Horizons for like almost 2 months, and Modern, if had there not been a ban, then Modern itself would have also not changed for a similar 2 months and been a very mature format. That's also partly why there was only one like pro player in the top 8, because the balance of advantage that the pro players normally get in some of the Mythic Championships was reduced quite a bit. So I think that's all the reasons that I was able to top 8 this tournament. Not the least of which that I got very lucky in some of my games where I had very good draws. I got very lucky in my pairings in the Modern rounds, and I got very lucky to open a Sarah in draft. I don't know. It takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of luck, or it takes a lot of skill to go 13 or 12-2 in the Pro Tour, not to mention going undefeated on day 2. But it also takes a whole lot of luck, and I'm not ever going to discount that fact. I'm sure I made scores of mistakes over the course of the tournament, but you know what? Other people made mistakes too, and it's just a matter of trying to make fewer mistakes than your opponent, and hopefully not as game-breaking ones. Encourage everyone to, if they want to do well at a Mythic Championship or at any kind of event, is to practice. I think streaming Magic Arena and Magic Online has definitely improved my practice a lot, because it's given me, in addition to the incentives I already had to like, you should probably practice for this very important tournament you're about to play, it's given me another like scheduled time to practice in front of viewers, and also get the occasional tip from people. Although honestly, chat, sometimes you make me worse. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. We're going to call it there for today. I'm going to be on the First Strike podcast for face-to-face games with KYT a little bit later, and I need to recuperate my voice before I lose it completely. We'll be back tomorrow, and we're actually going to start looking at Standard, because believe it or not, I've got more more Mythic Championships in mind. The Arena Mythic Championship qualifier weekend is Saturday the 17th of August, and it is Standard constructed. And I've played 0 Standard with Magic 2020, and so I need to quickly catch up on the Standard format and assemble a deck. Maybe it'll be Scapeshift, maybe some sort of Simic nonsense, and we need to catch up on the format and find a sweet deck real quick, so that we can go 13-2 in this event and qualify for the Arena Mythic Championship Arena Mythic Championship. That's it for... Oh, I got a dentist appointment on the 13th, too. That's it for me for today. I'm going to take an extendo break, and we'll see you tomorrow during my normal time, and we'll be playing some Standard in Magic Arena. It'll be a long time coming back to Arena. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I love you all. Bye-bye. That boop noise really cut under the emotion of my final statement there.